Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Sapience Institute Live. We are doing our first live session in which we are going to be talking to you, our beloved viewers, about what it is that you think is most important philosophically, theologically, for the du'a today to actually challenge, and also going over some of the Sapience Thoughts series and some of the videos that have been produced, and any question and answers that any questions that may actually arise. Now, I have with me brother Mohammed Hijab, mashallah, who has been very busy developing content, which is, very difficult to actually get good, credible, solid, referenced answers for. And it takes obviously a lot of time to actually develop these, such as, the standard shooting stars sort of contention, the recent one you did about the shape of the earth, and these types of things. So before we get into it, we're actually having a few people joining us now, which is mashallah brilliant. Some of the usual faces as well. So the first thing I want to ask you, Hijab, is that how much time does it take to actually produce one of these videos? Because obviously they're not produced like every day. It takes a bit of time. And what sort of process do you go through to actually develop this type of content?
Well, with Sapience Thoughts, the idea, what I'm trying to do with it, because obviously it's more than just me, you're involved, and Hussein's involved, Professor Ahmad is involved, and obviously Hamza's sources. So we're all kind of involved in this project. And what my end of it is, what I'm dealing with personally are the contentions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to have a portfolio or a database of contentions answered. So we're starting with the supposed or so-called scientific error narrative.
Yeah.
And we filmed practically almost all of the major contentions that we've seen online. Some of them don't need to be answered because, quite frankly, not many people are asking those questions. And there's almost nothing there, like in terms of contention. But with the main questions, we're starting with that. And that gives us an opportunity to talk about the approach as well, like the exegetical approach, principles, to lay down some principles, how people can safeguard themselves from shubuhat, from doubts, and also how to it empowers people to be able to answer questions.
Yeah,
to their colleagues, co-workers, family members, or friends, or whatever it may be. So we're going to move on to different kinds of contention after we've done the scientific error stuff. Supposed contradictions, historical issues, and so on. And once all the major contentions are done, even the moral stuff like women's rights and also questions about the hudud and all of that kind of thing. Once all of that is done, then we can move on to, well, from my side of it anyway, start presenting positive arguments now.
Yeah.
But I think if we have a database of contentions which are all kind of answered, transcribed, put online,
translated as well,
and even put into book form. So we will have all of the the idea is to get all the misconceptions of Islam, all of them answered, and for people to have a central database for that, whether it's paper-based or text-based on the internet or videographic, whatever it is. And so people can be really comfortable, or confident in being able to answer the most commonly asked questions about Islam from all perspectives.
Yeah.
And then after that, obviously, if we'll do the same thing with the positive arguments, then people will know how to answer questions that are challenging about Islam and how to make a case for Islam.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
And it sounds like something which quite obviously is needed, but just hasn't been done in the past, which is, I guess, like an encyclopedia of refuting these sort of contemporary doubts. Yeah. However, what I would say, so just before we get into the sort of videos that you've made, say an answer about an issue like the shooting stars or a particular science thing, how is the answers that have been developed by Sapience Institute different to what's already out there? Because you will find stuff scattered all over the internet, but what's the process, what's the reasoning, and what's the point of reinventing the wheel from one perspective? Someone may say, well, there's already good stuff out there, so what are we doing?
We don't think there is already good stuff out there. I think this is the problem. The good stuff is in different languages. Not everyone had in the past that were involved in apologetics, if you want to call it that, or answering these shubuhat. Not everyone had access to both, strong access to both the Arabic language and the English language, and both the academic access to both of those languages. I don't think many people in the past have had it with the focus that we have in the last 20 or 30 years. And if they did have that access, they didn't direct it into a concentrated effort, the like of which I think we're doing. And that's the first thing. The second thing is the method of those individuals, even if they had that access, was, we would call it flawed to some extent. For example, the scientific miracles narrative was problematic on many different fronts. Like, for example, there was cherry picking going on. You know, sometimes they would present facts as theories and theories as facts. They would superimpose meaning into the Quran or eisegesis. And obviously there's other issues as well. For example, the assumption is problematic to some extent with the scientific miracles narrative, because the assumption sometimes is that now we know a verse, what the meaning of it was, and before we didn't know what the meaning of it is. So the Big Bang, for example, كانت رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي. You know, chapter 21, verse 30. They say this is talking about the Big Bang, and I've just recorded a video on this about to what extent we can make connections like that. But to impose, definitely, this is talking about the Big Bang. This is problematic kind of reasoning, and because people had the method flawed one way or another, I think academically it wasn't robust and it wasn't sophisticated. You had two groups of people, I think, for the last 20 or 30 years online and even in written works that have been trying to operate, for example, on the scientific miracles thing. One group is individuals who are promoting the scientific miracles narrative, and the other group, for example, were a group that were trying to promote the scientific errors narrative. And both of those were employing very similar tactics, quite frankly. Cherry picking, disregarding other opinions, insisting that one opinion is more valid than the other, not allowing ambiguous verses to remain ambiguous, and so on and so forth. So there was issues there. So there was methodological issues that existed in the last 20 or 30 years, which are problematic. And then you had language access, which was limited. Not just the language access, but academic language access to both of the things. And then you had another issue, which is Sapience is really, I believe, a place where you have real academics, bona fide academics, that have studied, for example, philosophy, moral philosophy, philosophy of religion, history, whatever it may be, you know. And we've never had people of that level, you know, on different specialisms, all congregate in one place, sharing knowledge with one another, and then giving that knowledge out to people. In the Dawah in the past, we didn't have people of that level on these matters, because from our data that we have, the thing actually that threatens the iman of people the most is not these scientific miracles or the supposed contradictions, but it's actually morality.
Okay, so just before you get into that, and this is where I think things are very important with the way that we work within Sapience. So I remember a few months back when you did this project, and this project you were working with academics at Edinburgh, and it was a sort of an analysis of data online, and also a qualitative research into why you have apostasies from a Christian and a Muslim perspective. And then you actually came forward and said, it's the moral issue, guys. And when I first heard that, it got me a little bit rattled. I was kind of like, we're going in the wrong direction. So for many, many years, this was a big thing. It's scientism, it's Darwinism, it's liberalism, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's that. It's some sort of intellectual problem. But then that data, and if you can explain how that data came about, and the decision made from that, which you're making in terms of what to concentrate on, clearly shows the research angle, the data-led decisions of the institute, which allows us to actually surgically focus in on the problems rather than saying, we think science is the issue and here's what we think is the answer.
Yeah.
Rather, it's actually data-led, and I think that's key here.
It is data-led, and we've got professionals, obviously lecturers in universities in Aberdeen and other different universities, Oxford and so on, like helping us understand what the problem is, and in terms of shubuhat, in terms of doubts, in terms of apostasies and all those things. And additionally, in terms of bringing in people to Islam, what people find most convincing as well.
Yeah.
And these are the two avenues we're exploring. But in terms of, there's no doubt, it's an open secret really now that the in terms of all the shubuhat, that the categories of shubuhat or the categories of doubts that people have, morality is number one. There's no doubt about that. We're talking about women's rights, issues to do with women's rights, issues to do with liberalism, the hudud. Those things are central now. And quite frankly, we've not had people that are as trained as like I said before, in these areas, political philosophy, moral philosophy, in philosophy of religion, philosophy of science, as we do together, congregating in one place, and willing, by the way, and this is an important difference, willing to attack feminism and liberalism and stuff like that. There are other institutes out there that do great work, but they, for political reasons, will not attack liberalism and feminism. They will not attack those things, or definitely not liberalism, because they have connections with the liberal left, for example.
Yeah.
But this is the head of the snake. If we cannot attack liberalism, we're not going to be on the back foot. Or if we cannot attack second wave feminism in particular, we're definitely going on the back foot. So we've been doing it wrong, I believe, because we have been trying to persuade people. Like, if you look at the apologists' arguments on morality, like in the last 20 or 30 years, why is polygamy allowed in Islam? Or because there's more men than women. It's a really, with all due respect, it's quite a pathetic argument. There's more men than women. It's not Allah. It's not hikmah. It's for me. I've never been convinced by that. With all due respect. Like,
well, the larger problem it creates is there's more men in China than women. And we should.
Yeah. It's like this is the level that we were operating.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, we got away on a wing and a prayer at that time.
Yeah, it did. But we can't do that.
We can't do that anymore. No.
That's not going to satisfy anybody. Yeah. The truth of the matter is, we have a different paradigm to feminists, second wave feminists. And the fact that we have now diagnosed the problem in a different way, we have diagnosed the problem in a different way, is the first step. We know what the problem is. People are now looking into the Quran with a liberal, with a small L liberal mindset or the feminist mindset, and they are comparing liberal ethics with Islamic ethics. And we have to bring that to the fore and show what the inconsistencies are here and how to solve these inconsistencies.
Okay, so just before we get into that, I mean, by the way, everybody that's watching, I am actually watching very closely, and I'm trying to absorb the questions coming in, the comments coming in. Yeah. Now, something which, because of the level of comments coming in, rather than trying to address each question, which we, inshallah, will do when it's relevant, something that is coming up is the idea that, you guys are using, you've been trained, many of you, from a Western philosophical perspective, and you're trying to undermine liberalism and scientism and these types of things. But you're using essentially a tool which is the very tool which, according to the argument, is the cause of the doubts in the first place, i.e., in other words, you're using philosophy and these philosophical ideas, and they're questioning the legitimacy of using philosophy to refute these ideas. And in fact, quite directly, one of the comments was that there seems to be a scholarly consensus that using philosophy is forbidden in Islam. So can we deal with that elephant in the room before we move on?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely. First, we have to define what philosophy is, because when in the medieval time period, when the ulama were talking about al-falasifa, they were talking about Ibn Sina and his followers. Anyone who knows, who reads the falasifa, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about, there was some discussion about is mantiq halal or haram and things like that. But at the end of the day, right now, it's one of those things where first and foremost, if you want me to bring quotations from Ibn Taymiyyah and whatnot, we have those, that he allowed it. And he even, in many different places, Minhaj as-Sunnah, al-Radd al-Muntaqiyin, he says some people require, he said this, some people, I'm paraphrasing here, but I've got these kinds of quotes. Some people require philosophical arguments. For them, you have to give it to them. Yeah, the types of arguments you give them are philosophical, because it's like going into a fight, a gunfight, with a knife,
with a pencil.
Honestly, it's like, if it's ridiculous. I'm actually surprised that we're even having this discussion. It's what it's like is this. Like, let me give you an analogy. Like 25 years ago, MMA started. 1994, I think, is the first time MMA started.
Yeah.
And they had UFC 1. UFC 1 was with Hoist Gracie and all of that, and he won even though he was quite small, he beat the bigger guys.
Yeah.
Shamrock and
there's no weight categories.
yeah. I don't know how the weight categories work, and it was like a one continuous round or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the rules were. But the mixed martial arts had changed forever. Everyone knew now what was effective and what was not effective. It took about 20 years to find out, and we found out what was effective and what was not effective. We found out grappling, BJJ, Muay Thai, freestyle wrestling, or Sambo even, these things are very effective. Some aspects of Taekwondo, they were effective. Some aspects of karate were, not all of it, were effective. The things were not effective were the things that were not effective. They're people that are not doing now. So if you want to be an MMA fighter, you have to learn now. You have to learn, for example, BJJ, you have to learn freestyle wrestling. You have to know some base, you have to know, at least if you are a striker, you have to know how to anti-grapple. You have to. If you don't, you're going to lose. Simple as that, really. And now, if we're saying to the du'at now that you want to do da'wah and you don't want to know the basics of philosophy, or at least how to deal with shubuhat philosophically and how to answer or go on the offensive philosophically, it's just like getting a fighter to go into an arena like MMA or something like that, not teaching them grappling, giving them one-dimensional type of
do taekwondo,
and then go into the ring. They'll be finished straight away. And what it is now is that at the end of the day, we have to act strategically, because the maqsad here, the objective is to لِتَكُونْ كَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ الْعُلْيَا, that we bring Allah's word and make it the highermost. This is the strategy. If in a strategy of war, I'm sorry to say, back in the days, when they had books were back in the days, right? When strategies of physical war that were taking place, people would do things that were most conducive.
Yeah.
We're not going to put ourselves in a position where someone's going to come and ask us questions to do with philosophy or philosophy of science or moral philosophy. And these are the main questions being asked against Islam today. And the one thing we can do is respond by saying, but Islam gave women rights that they didn't have before. Polygamy was limited from unlimited to 4, or that, for example, one of the talaq is this, or this issue, or hijab is this issue, and we're answering
pheromones when wearing the hijab.
It's been for me, it's been unsatisfaction. I've been dissatisfied with the whole thing. So we have to teach any dua that want to get this dawah game now. If you want to bring it into the analogy of dawah, you can't do it. Right now in the 21st century, I would even go as far as to say you'll be unsuccessful if you don't have this grounding. You will be unsuccessful.
Okay, so that's obviously something that we can see when you're involved in the arena. You're directly there.
Yeah.
But would you say there is a gap between, say, the older generation who maybe have just seen stuff like Ahmad Hijab using the Bible, just refuting, and then also just other people just using the Quran and just speaking to others, and then not really realizing that actually this issue is far more prevalent at a grassroots level than it was 20, 30 years ago. At a grassroots level 20, 30 years ago, philosophical arguments against Islam, or these types of hardcore atheistic narratives, they hadn't really penetrated. So would you say that, again, we're not pointing fingers here, but we're saying it's almost like, to really understand what you're saying in terms of the natural selection of ideas that happens within the MMA of the dawah, you have to feel the pain before you realize. And it's very comfortable sitting in say the Middle East, and you're not affected by any of that, and you're kind of like, well, why are you doing that? Like, you're not in the thick of it and you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it perfectly. It's only when these same individuals and I must say from my own experience, is exactly how you said it is, because I've known people that were, let's say, very conservative, maybe Salafis that are, associated with it, and that have this very strong stance against philosophy and stuff like that. And they say it's against the Salaf, and Imam Shafi'i would hit with the shoe and this and that. They're taking everything out of context. But even though a Shafi'i wrote a Risala, which is basically it's a logic book, if you want to put it that way.
I think this is very important. This is actually technically a fallacy of equivocation. So if I start having a heart attack right now, I'm like, is there a doctor in the house? And Hijab says, I'm a doctor. And I'm like, all right, help me. I've got a PhD in sociology. I'll be like, no, not that doctor, medical doctor. It's a fallacy of equivocation. Repeatedly equating philosophy with kalam is the very problem, right? I mean, the basic thinking about thinking, something which is very Quranic, something which is very clear that the Muslims were doing for hundreds of years, quite loosely.
I said this to Hamza the other day. I said to him, you know how Dawkins, famously said, Darwin allowed us to be intellectually satisfied atheists. I think if Salafis had to say the same thing, they'd have to say Ibn Taymiyyah made us intellectually satisfied Salafis. And the reason why is because he delved the very thing.
I like that.
Think about it.
I like that.
Look, who before Ibn Taymiyyah did what he did? Only Ahmad ibn
Hanbal. Well, absolutely. But also
after the Sahaba, right? No, he engaged with it. Okay.
Not only this, I mean, if we take his works, rahimahullah, and we actually rip off the name and just go post it through someone's letterbox, they would actually say, this is pure kalam. This is pure philosophy.
Bro, it's in the philosophy department. You go into books, go to most universities. His mantiqiyin and all that stuff. You see this deep philosophy, man. From that angle, these guys, the problem is they don't even know what it is. They know what is. They don't know what philosophy is.
And it's very easy to dismiss these things until, and this is the thing, your child comes back from school and says something, and then you're like,
that's what happens. They come to realize that. We've been around the country, and we've been in other countries that are in the West. After a couple of years, conservative Muslims, or whatever you want to call them, ultra conservative, don't want to engage with the outside world, however you want to brand them, After a while, they'll be knocking on your door. And that happens. In the beginning, it says haram, blah, blah, blah. Wallahi, 2 years later, they call him and say, look, my son, he started saying things like LGBT is not, how do we argue with that? Okay, if you didn't argue with me about philosophy is haram or halal 5 years ago, you would have been fine. Your son would have, I'm not saying your son wouldn't have gone that direction, Allahu Alam, but you would have known how to deal with that situation. It's the fact that you've wanted to keep yourself ignorant on something that is so pertinent that has made you fail in this regard.
It's kind of like this, some Muslim parents, and we're both parents now, they think, okay, when my child's a teenager, I'm not going to tell them about anything that's out there. I'm just going to shelter them as if they won't find out, as if they don't know, as if, that they live in some sort of cocoon. You have to be able to vaccinate against these very ideas. And the other thing is that, look, Sapience Institute, the aim is, like you said, we want to have a library, we want to have a catalog of, okay, so we have this particular doubt, this is how it's been refuted. And the powerful thing about this methodology is it's sort of crowdsourced as well. So it's not just simply the case of, okay, so Hijab, Hamza, Imran, Yusuf ponders, let's just go out there, develop this stuff. All of you guys watching, mashallah, some 260 right now watching live, you have questions, you may have answers, help us, and we're open to have volunteers as well. And we can actually see, okay, so here's a problem, here's a novel solution, does it actually work? Can we actually apply it? Now let's delve into some of the videos that you've been working on, because it relates to this, some of the comments that are coming in. So there's a Muslim who says, I am a Muslim who believes the earth is flat according to the Quran, and there are some Muslims in the Gulf who believe the earth is flat. And so his perspective is, it's not just that he believes it, he believes it's also a Quranic paradigm. So this is something that you've tackled in the past, and it's something that atheists use against us as well. But some Muslims believe the earth is flat, and even in fact right now some Westerners and non-Muslims, they're actually starting to hold this view as well. But how would you address this point that the Quran supports a flat earth theory?
Look, having the belief that the earth is flat is not kufri, because you can interpret some of the verses to mean that the entire globe is flat. If you really wanted to do that, it's not kufri, so long as it's not something which takes you out of the fold of Islam, because the wording in the Quran is not so explicit and that it would take someone out of Islam if you believed it. And evidence of that is that there have been some scholars in the past who have believed that the earth is flat, and I think Al-Qurtubi is one of them actually.
Right.
Al-Qurtubi, he believed that the earth. I remember reading his tafsir. He believed that the earth was flat. He's a major scholar, but I would say probably the majority, especially when dealing with exegesis, did not believe that. So Ibn Jawzi didn't believe that. In his Masir, obviously Ibn Hazm didn't believe that. Al-Juwayni didn't believe that. Al-Ghazali didn't believe that. Ibn Taymiyyah didn't believe that. Ibn Taymiyyah said there's ijma' on it. And he went back to Ahmad and Mohammed and his students and said that they believe that as well, that it was round. So and a lot of these individuals, they use the Quran. So يكون الليل على النهار ويكون النهار على الليل وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى, like 39:5 in the Quran, where it says takwir. And Ibn Hazm said that this takwir cannot happen on a flat surface because Qura means ball in the Arabic language. Takwir is going around something which is round. That's what the implication is. And so I think the evidence is pretty strong that it's round in the Quran from this verse alone. But if you want to believe it's flat, I'm not, to each their own. It's not a kufri belief.
But what if somebody says this is the Quranic paradigm?
You can't say it. Just like I said, you can believe it's flat and have the Quran to try and support what you believe, but you have to allow that for other people as well. What are you going to say to medieval scholars? The flat Earth movement, they're saying it's a conspiracy. From my understanding, I'm not an expert on the flat Earth movement. It's a conspiracy and this and that and all of that. Well, how could it be a conspiracy for the pre-enlightenment individuals? It's not a conspiracy for them.
No.
Of all due respect, it's not a conspiracy for Ahmad ibn Hanbal and his students, and it's not a conspiracy for Ibn Munada and Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Ghazali and Al-Razi, Fakhruddin Al-Razi, Ibn Jawzi. All of those believed the earth was right. So it's not like there was a grand conspiracy or collusion for 1,400 years of Islamic history. If you want to say that there's no other interpretation except for that the earth is flat, this is clearly false. It's just historically false. It's not even a matter of opinion or with respect. It's historically false, because people before America became a superpower, before the NASA even had spacecrafts, before whatever conspiracy you think happened, people were saying that the earth was round from the Muslim world, and they were using verses in the Quran. So you can't say that the only opinion, just like I can't say the only opinion is the earth is round. Maybe there's a few opinions that said the earth is flat. Fine, I've just said Al-Qurtubi is one of them. I'm not aware of that many of them. But to each their own. It's not a kufri thing, one way or the other. It's not something which I believe takes you out of the fold of Islam.
Jazakallah khair for that. While you were speaking, we actually had a lot more questions coming in.
Do you want to send me the link? I can put it on the community as well.
Yes, I'll do that now.
Okay. Questions?
So at the beginning, we mentioned about obviously the the various topics that we've been making videos about, and there's one thing that comes up repeatedly that's been used by the atheists, which is about the sun having its not the sun, the stars being shooting at the devils, and how this is unscientific and how this is irrational. So can you summarize that video? Because I think that's the topic which the way, alhamdulillah, that you addressed it in that video, I haven't heard it addressed like that before. And I also feel that the very answer exposes the questioner when it comes to this contention that's thrown out. It just shows the multiple layers of mistakes that they actually make in even raising such a question.
I don't even know why they, with all due respect, and I don't even get why this is a contention. And I don't think, to be honest, it's a contention that many Muslims take seriously. But because some of these anti-Muslim apologists have brought it up in the last, I don't know what it is, it's started to be discussed. But like one of the main issues I put it on the community, by the way.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. One of the main issues is that it's a category mistake fallacy. Like, I'm starting to see some really stupid things from the anti-Muslim apologetics. Like, when the Quran or the Sunnah are clearly talking about metaphysical things, they somehow call this unscientific.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with science? Like, it's clearly beyond science. It's clearly not meant to be scientific.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we consult David Hume's definition of what a miracle is, something which is outside the scope of natural law, or whatever he said it was, these things are intended to be like that. So there's a category now of mistakes, or that how could it be possible that the sea was split into two, or how could it be possible that the moon split, or all of these things which are necessarily intended to be miracles, something which is metaphysical. They're saying it's unscientific, when basic philosophy of science student will tell you, as you'll know more than me actually, is that this is methodological naturalism, and so with a methodological natural science is based on that, with methodological naturalism, and therefore anything outside of that naturalism is not going to be included in it by definition.
Yeah.
So all these miracles and stuff, like, that's got nothing to do with. It's got nothing to do with science. And it's not like the author of the Quran, whoever they think it is, was not aware of that. They were intentionally trying to project that, or present that. So this is why I think it's problematic, and I just feel like there's a misattributed quote to Albert Einstein. It's not actually a true quote, where he said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result." It sounds good, but it's not from Albert Einstein. It's misattributed. But this is what, if there is some element of truth in that definition, which I don't think is fully coherent, but this is what they're doing. They're continuing the same shubuhat that they had 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they're expecting a different result. These ones are the weakest ones. Like we talk about the bloody meteorite and the devil, and you think people are going to leave Islam because of that? Like, is that your best shot?
Yeah.
When I was talking to Apus on the live stream, that was the first thing he brought up. Like, is that really the strongest thing you have? This thing probably got millions of views. I don't know how many views it got altogether. Like, if you think about Adam Saleh's podcast channel, on my channel, his channel, probably got about 1 million views altogether, or something like that, or if not close to it. And you had a chance to present your strongest argument. The first thing you brought was it says in the Quran that the meteorites or the solar flares are attacking the devils, or whatever it is that he said. How could this be scientific? Like, really, like, you have a chance to disprove Islam. You got, and this is the first. Is that seriously? Like, that actually gives me, and I think millions of Muslims worldwide, a lot of confidence in Islam.
Absolutely. And I think what we want to do next is, this part of the process, I really want to manage well, because I have done this in the past, and I really have to put my foot down sometimes. We're going to be inviting people to the live stream, but the point of coming on the live stream is not to say, "Oh, I love Mohammed Hijab." Yeah, we don't need that.
That's the one. If you don't want to do that, then please don't come on the live stream.
No, if you come on the live stream, just if you have a question for Sapience Institute to actually answer, please join the live stream. And the reason also is, when I normally put the link, the room gets bombarded. We can only let in 10 people in the studio. That's the limit. And anybody that joins after 10, they get booted out automatically. We've had non-Muslims in the past who've joined the live stream, and because the Muslims were there, and some of the Muslims just wanted to say, "Oh, we love this person."
Oh, this is fine. They can say that, brother. Why are you making this so?
So please, anybody with questions, we're going to be putting the link there and answering your questions. And of course, we love to hear from the audience, and we We want to interact as much as possible, but keep in mind we want to give priority to obviously people who have questions. We want, forget that. The essence of what we want to do is we want to be able to answer questions and answer them effectively, and also from you find out actually what are the upcoming burning issues that we actually need to deal with as well. Now, our boss is actually supposed to be live right now, but is not. But anyway, he sent some questions.
Is that before the people start asking questions?
Yeah, I mean, look, I put up the link, and look what's happened.
There's a lot of them there.
There's a lot of them there, mashallah. Okay, so
is that Jim?
I'm just allowing Jim to join. Can you unmute yourself, please, Jim?
Yeah. So my question to Muhammad, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, yes. That's what
So my question to Muhammad Hijab is regarding this miracle of splitting the moon into two by Prophet Muhammad, and there is probably no historical records to suggest that this happened, like not outside Arabia or something like that. And also, if this happened, the astronomical people who are in different parts of the world, they didn't. The people who used to do astronomy in 5th and 6th centuries, they also didn't talk about something like this happening.
Yeah.
So in terms of both science observation and also in terms of historical record, how to confirm that this miracle happened?
Yeah. So
Jazakallah khair, Jim.
Jazakallah khair, Jim, first and foremost. So if someone says to you, there is no evidence of something, therefore it didn't happen, this is called an argument from silence fallacy. It's fallacious reasoning. Just because there's no evidence of something, or there is currently no evidence of something, it doesn't mean that that thing didn't happen. I'll give you a great example of this. Like, for example, from what I gather from reading some of the material on basically Hebrew narratives, and especially like David alayhi salam, Dawood. So David, if you look at, for example, some of the academics, I'm trying to remember their name, like Israel Finkelstein, not Norman Finkelstein. There's a guy called Israel Finkelstein and others who were pretty against, like they were against the idea that David could have actually existed as a prophet, etc. And a lot of them had in their writings that there's no evidence of David. There's no evidence of, and then there's something called the Tel Dan stela. This stela was basically like a rock, and on it had, the house of David. So a lot of people started changing their minds on the existence of this thing called the house of David, because there was extra biblical evidence to promote this idea that there was this, Tel Dan stela, and now saying house of David and so on. So now there's extra biblical. Now they have to reassess the information and say, well, maybe there was such a thing, maybe there was such a place, but maybe it's not as it's mentioned in the Bible. They still have their reservations, but they've changed their stance.
Yeah.
So if we're saying this discovery, I don't know when it was made, by the way, maybe it was made 20 years ago, but say this discovery was made 20 years ago. If it wasn't made 30 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, people would be saying there's no evidence.
Yeah.
And if they were saying no, there's no evidence, therefore there's no extra biblical evidence of the existence of David.
Yeah.
We would say that would be an argument from silence. And the problem with arguments from silence is that all it takes is a decade or two for it to be disproven. And we know now, especially with the proliferation of like archaeological evidences, not everything has been dug up. Not everything has been codified. Yeah. Number two is that we can't expect, like, let's say, for example, this is the whole splitting of the moon phenomenon. When did it happen? Let's say it happened with the Prophet ﷺ in a particular time. Let's say after Maghrib, after sunset time.
Yeah.
First of all, what was the population of the earth at that time? I would probably estimate it, Allahu Alam. I mean, we don't have any strong figures on this. There was no census that was being done everywhere in the world. Like, we don't have any strong figures. But you can imagine 7th century Arabia, because like only 100 years ago, the population of the world was 1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone up sevenfold in 100 years.
Yeah, but there's also another additional assumption here,
Yeah.
and we can just undercut this argument completely, which is this miracle is a miracle because we believe the Quran is a miracle. And since we can give evidence that the Quran is the word of Allah, that it doesn't matter with anything else that it says in the Quran, whether we have whether someone thinks it meets up to a certain criteria or it doesn't. Secondly, this whole idea of, okay, there weren't people around or we don't have evidence today. Who is to say that that is what Allah intended? This could be a miracle, as it's been explained by some scholars, that it was just for the Quraysh because it was for them. So, you know, it is inconceivable for someone to use an argument which is conditional, which is in essence what they're saying is, it's not meeting my criteria. My criteria is there should be evidence today, and there should be evidence of independent people, some people in China who saw it when that was never the intention.
No, but hold on. There's another thing as well, right?
Yeah.
So if going back to the population numbers, if we're saying there's about 1 billion people 100 years ago, yeah, what was the population figures for 1,400 years ago? Maybe 100 million.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 million.
Yeah.
Allahu Alam. It could have been anywhere from 50 million to 150 million.
Yeah.
These are just some of my estimates here in my mind. Now, of those individuals, what was it in terms of night?
Okay, so
nighttime.
Can you wrap this up a little bit, because
in terms of nighttime, how many of those individuals would it have been night for?
Yeah.
Then you're going to eliminate another, and then how many if it was nighttime, how many of them were awake? Then you're going to eliminate this and that. Now the point is, if you don't accept, and how long did this last for? I mean, this lasts for a second or two.
Yeah.
Would it have been significant enough for people to record it?
Yeah.
If something happened for 1 second, if I looked into the sky and saw something, would I record that as an astronomer? There's
loads of ways.
It's not a great answer, but it's not a great argument. But the point I'm making is this: is that finally we have asanid, and the Prophet said in the hadith when he pointed at the qamar, the moon, he says, "Ashhidu." He said, "Bear witness to this. Bear witness to this." And the people that saw it bore witness to it. Now, here's the final part of this argument I just want to put to the people. The Quran says, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. That the hour has come close and the moon has been split. If this was something which was foreign to the majority of the target audience, they would have rejected that.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, you know when the Quran says...
Okay, so let's...
Should we move on?
Because there's loads of people... Sorry, Hijab.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so Earth...
But we'll make a video on that if it's something that's required.
Yeah, so Earth, could you ask a question, please?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
I'm the person that you talk... You've been answering me about the flat earth.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why that there's many people every Christian or Muslim or anybody, they say that there's God. They use cosmological argument. Then the Christian, they're gonna say that this is Jesus. Muslims, they're gonna say this is Allah, and everybody they will use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the cosmological argument is not making an argument for a God, man.
And like we say, who create the universe? They say we don't know. If we say that from God, they say it's like I don't know. I'm going to say it Arabic. مغالطة الاحتكام إلى الجهل.
Okay.
So what did they prove that the universe is from Allah, not just God, from Allah?
Well, there's only so far logic can take us. We can't, in terms of the arguments that we make, we don't make arguments for all, not even 99, but whatever it is attributes that are in the Quran. We don't say that the cosmological argument or the contingency argument or the fine-tuning argument or the ontological, any of these arguments can give us that Allah is Rahman and Rahim and Wadud and Al-Kareem and all of those things. No, we say that if you argue well and you argue properly, we will be able to establish that Allah is pre-eternal, post-eternal, He's one, He's powerful and He's knowledgeable, and everything depends upon Him and He depends upon nothing, which for us is a base definition. The samadiyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wahdaniyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can argue for those things. The sifat or the attributes that you would be able to understand from Surah Al-Ikhlas, we can get to that level.
Yeah.
But the level of all the sifat and whatever, and all of the asma and sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that requires someone to believe in the Quran, and for that there requires to be an argument from the Quran. And the Quran is the word of Allah for us to get all of these other attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Brother Tupac.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. How are you, brother?
So,
My question.
it's there with Biggie as well.
Yeah. My question was, what are the sort of general ideas of how, of the differences in the way that we have to approach the atheists and maybe even pagans of today versus how the Prophet ﷺ and the companions had to approach the pagans of their time and the Christians of their time? And how can we maybe utilize the tools of the 21st century, maybe, technology and the study of philosophy and the studies that have emerged in modern academia to sort of spread Islam in a way that's most suitable to the people of our time?
The main difference is that in that time, a lot of pagans, like the Quran says many times, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُم مَّنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say Allah. Even the pagans would say that. Now, if you ask some of the atheists, they'll say, I don't know, or they will say, it's not. They wouldn't say Allah. So we have to start with rububiyyah. Before, they didn't really have to start with rububiyyah in that sense, or they had to start with uluhiyyah. But we have to start with rububiyyah. So, and that's in a way that what Ibrahim alayhi salam did in Surah Al-An'am, when he was talking about, this is my Lord, this is my Lord, and he did something called argumentum ad absurdum. So showed that all these things can't be his Lord. Therefore, something which doesn't have these contingent qualities must be something which is necessary and powerful, and it doesn't set in the case of the sun and the moon and so on. Yeah.
So, I mean, overall, I would add,
Yeah.
look, when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, he was smashing idols. He was smashing the idols of Lat, Uzza, Manat, and what were they? They were basically where the creation of Allah gave the creation of Allah some attributes of Allah and said, okay, Lat, Uzza, Manat, these things, they suffice us, they take care of us. Well, there's no difference between the atheists today and the Quraysh then, because for the atheists, the universe or natural selection or mother nature, this is the new Lat, this is the new Uzza. It's the same thing. They've given nature that placeholder label rather than sticks and stones, but in essence it's the same argument. And you find this, that the universe has a plan for you. It's the same thing, it's the exact same thing. So there isn't much of a difference here. Okay, let's move on to Brother Rida Tilani.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
Hi. Okay, so I have two questions. Can I ask both, or can I only ask one of the two?
One, please, my brother. It's just we have a lot of people. Yeah.
No issues. So basically, I had an interesting discussion with an atheist the other day. And the discussion was regarding quantum mechanics and in relation to the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument. This individual's argument, basically he's saying, sorry? Okay, basically what this person is saying is something can come from nothing because basically saying something can come from nothing because quantum mechanics is indeterministic, meaning that it manipulates space-time, this is what he said. And then he said, according to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, in a vacuum, particles are birthed in and out of existence, something along those lines. What I'm wondering is, can you maybe give me some more insight into?
Sorry to cut you. That's a very, very simple old contention. Anything within the universe that is taking place is obviously taking place within a rich sea of particles, so it's not from nothing. And just because we don't know the cause doesn't mean that something can pop into existence from nothing. And if something does come within this universe, then it's within the universe, right? So there is obviously some causation there. So this is an argument which has been dealt with in the past. It's basically you could classify it as another fallacy of equivocation, because what they mean by nothing is not what we mean by nothing, which is an absence of anything, right? But if something's happening within the universe, then obviously it cannot be nothing.
That's right.
So Hamza's book has this contention in a lot more detail. But yeah, that's a very quick way of
also
addressing it.
Rasmussen's book has the necessary existence.
No.
He's got something on one of the objections from quantum mechanics. If you want further reading, you can go to that book.
Brilliant. Okay, let's go to Brother Faisal. Faisal, are you there?
Didn't we just speak to Faisal?
Did we speak to Faisal? Okay. Remove. Okay.
I don't know if we
So, by the way, if we answer your questions, please could you leave the studio, because other people are trying to join. So the next one is to Khan.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Subboor. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, I'm very happy to talk with you. I have a question. According to the philosophy of materialism, everything is purposeless and meaningless. Then we ask a question: why do we feel a sense of meaning? They asked that Richard Dawkins explained it in the selfish gene that meaning is something that environment gives us, and we think that this is a meaning, and that mutation in genes cause us to think that there is meaning. Obviously, there is no meaning. So natural selection is something that creates an illusion of meaning.
Yep. And this is a standard sort of question which is asked, and many of these sort of things are put forward. And the problem here is it's an assertion. It's not an argument. So, you know, natural selection has designed us in a way that is making us more likely to be creationists. That's another thing that they say. In addition to it's created this this illusion within us that there should be meaning in the universe, or this illusion within us to believe in God because we have a design detection module which we developed in our evolutionary history. All of these are assertions.
Yeah.
Now, in order for you to challenge an assertion, you first need them to give you an argument. When they give you an argument, then you can challenge the premises and then you can actually refute it. But at this moment, all they've said is, here is an assertion. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So that's the way you deal with this. We say, what's your...
They say that it is an environment. It is your environment which gives you some meanings. So due to the mutation in DNA or genes, you think that there is a meaning.
Yep, that's an assertion. What's the evidence for that?
Like today, we are doing the same thing. When our environment gives us a meaning, when we're born, we don't think that we have a meaning. When our environment tells us you have a meaning, or parents tell us that, they give evidence on this.
But how does that show that natural selection selected that? What's the evidence for that?
I don't think so. There is any evidence.
Because you have to remember, the way evolution works, and this is extremely important for everyone to understand, even Darwinists get this wrong sometimes. It's not the case that our mind develops because of the environment now. It doesn't. Our mind developed in a period of time when we were hunter-gatherers, in which we had a stable environment for hundreds of thousands of years. In this environment, in which every decade is complete change, there's not enough time for natural selection to shape your cognitive mechanisms. Therefore, the way Darwinists see it is we're mismatched for the modern world. So even when they start saying, well, we're acting like this because of the internet, and the internet's affected us and we evolved, all of that is nonsense, because our evolutionary history, even according to them, happened in the hunter-gatherer era. And you know, this whenever they say things like, well, meaning is not intrinsic, meaning doesn't exist, it's purely environmentally induced, we can simply say, well, there's no evidence for that. And secondly, if you are going to say that it's environmentally induced and it's something which natural selection came up with, then you have to give us a little bit of evidence for that, for us to even to begin to have the conversation. But again, they need to give a argument. They're just giving an assertion. And you have to be able to, as a da'iyah, you have to be able to simply, not only in this case, but in every case that this comes up, simply dismiss it. Because
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
yeah, it's like this. I sometimes get Muslims saying, my atheist friend said design is an illusion. I don't answer the question. I say, well, first they need to give argument for that assertion, then we can deal with it. So it's the same thing, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, brother. Thank you so much.
Okay, next is, I'm going to give this to you, Hijab, the guy with the thumbs up.
Let's see what he says.
The guy with the thumbs up.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. I wanted to ask a question about equality generally in the Middle East. If Islam came to establish equality, obviously back then people were mistreated and all of that. Today we see large amounts of inequality, especially when it comes to the female side of things. So to me there's a disconnect, and obviously I could be wrong, but where did that kind of disconnect happen, and where did it go off the rails, if that makes sense?
Are you talking about race or gender? Sorry, just gender by itself.
I mean gender by itself at the moment, but yeah, just gender.
Yeah, so for sure, Islam is not trying to do what feminism is trying to do. You know, second wave feminism is saying that despite all of the differences that we have, anatomical and so on, that we should have equality between men and women. And Islam says that generally there's equality between the law, or should be at least, equality in front of the law, because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ, that certainly men are equal to women. But there are very clear exceptions to that. So we don't believe in an absolute equality, like the way in which someone like Ngozi, the one who wrote the Feminist Manifesto recently, she was saying that I was reading her book, a very small book, and she was saying we believe in absolute equality for the genders, except for breastfeeding. I think that was the one thing that she made as an exception. We say that there's some real anatomical and physiological and psychological and emotional and psychological differences between men and women, and those all need to be taken into consideration when in prescription. And so we don't share the same beliefs as second wave feminists, which say that there should be an equality, complete equality, but exactly like the same man and woman. We don't believe that. We believe that there should be a complementarity. Okay, we don't believe in equality. We believe in complementarity.
Yeah.
And so
just to add to that, even if we take their standard line of how we came about, society was never egalitarian. In fact, evolutionary psychologists find themselves completely at odds with feminist and egalitarian values. So, for example, toxic masculinity is something that some evolutionary psychologists see a function for. Likewise, gender roles, there's a function for that. There's a reason why natural selection, according to them, has shaped patriarchal societies. So I think what we need to be clear about, and what Hijab was saying earlier, our paradigm is not like theirs. So when we say equality, when we say this or we say that, we don't mean the same thing.
That's right.
They mean something totally different. But what's important to note is that we have a basis, and the basis is the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, technically, Allah could have said the man gets half the inheritance that the woman gets. We would accept it because that's what Allah said, but Allah said the opposite. Or Allah could have said something totally different. The thing is, a memonist can read the Quran and say the Quran is unfair towards men because men have to go to war and men have to die and men have to do the difficult jobs and they have to provide. A feminist can read the Quran and say the Quran is against women because of this verse and that verse. Allah does no injustice to anyone. But what's very important, my brother, is our lens, our starting paradigm is that we submit to the commands of Allah, and our understanding of equality, our understanding of what is just is what Allah has decided. It's not a human construct. Because if you look at their narratives, which is, this is what we mean by equality. Oh, really? Is that what you mean by equality? How did this develop? You start to see that actually their terms are undefined, their arguments are unrefined as well, and they are completely at odds with each other in terms of origins of these particular values, and their implications in society today. So if you have this argument, down with patriarchy, great, down with patriarchy, but didn't natural selection, according to you, design patriarchy to create societies which have social cohesion? And this is extremely important to understand, that whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, alhamdulillah, you're Muslim, but the Muslim narrative is coherent and it's a rival to the other narrative, but the other narrative is incoherent. In of itself, there is a fundamental problem with the idea that natural selection shaped our psychological mechanisms and our values and our ethics and all of these things, and the egalitarian ideas, because you cannot find those egalitarian ideas when you look at evolutionary history, unless you start to do some cherry picking and saying, well, bonobos are like this, but let's ignore the chimps, stuff like that.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair.
Cheers.
Okay, next is the guy with the duck. I don't even know how to pronounce that.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Walaikum salam.
So my question is about Islamic ruling. So Surah 2, I guess, verse 21, it says you shouldn't marry the polytheists, basically talking to men, Muslim men. And then there is and then it's in Surah 5, verse 5, it says you're allowed to marry Christians. And no, as far as I see, like, Christians are polytheists. They worship two gods. Three.
Okay, so just before that, Brother Faithful, I kicked you out of the studio by complete accident. Can you please rejoin? Yeah. But the problem is that I thought we already answered your question. That's why I booted you out, because we were trying to add more people, but that's been a mistake.
You out, that's a bit strong.
Yeah, well, well, he doesn't mind. He sounds like a cool guy. But right now the studio is a bit full. But do try and join. By the way, I do have to. Sorry,
did we do this guy?
No, but we have to be a bit brutal. Sorry.
Now you're going all Darwin on us, man.
So sorry, guys.
Survival of the fittest. It's not even that. It's
okay. Jazakallah khair, brother. Did you understand his question?
Yeah, just leave him on, because we might need to probe. Yeah, look, I think that you have to understand that there are, first of all, if this is an attempt to try and show there's an inconsistency of the Quran, the problem is with identifying contradictions and inconsistencies. And what one has to do is they have to know what a contradiction and inconsistency actually is. When the Quran says لَوَجَدُوا فِي اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا, in chapter 4, verse 82, if this was لو كان من عند غير الله لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا, if they were from other than God, they would have found there many contradictions. What is a contradiction? It's something which is irreconcilable. It's completely unreconcilable. You cannot reconcile it. And you can pick up, like, for example, the Logic Handbook by Halbach. It's a book, and there is definitions of what contradictions are, and you'll find in it, there's no way in which, for example, this is a propositional logic or whatever, but it still applies to our context here. And he defines it, someone is obviously not Muslim or whatever, but this is the kind of book that they probably read in undergraduate philosophy courses. Contradiction is something which there is no way of harmonizing. There's no way of trying reconciling it. And obviously, something which is apparently contradictory can be not contradictory. So, for instance, in this situation, the general ruling is that you don't marry polytheists, but the exception only proves the rule. It doesn't. There's most rules that exist out there, whether they're even mathematical or scientific or any qaida, any actual principle, you're going to find exceptions. And so that's why you have something called al-khas wal-am, and also al-mutlaq wal-muqayyad. These are two terms that the usulis, the scholars of jurisprudence, they put into place, because mutlaq is, we're talking, and on the flip side, am as well, is something which is generic. But then you have something which is khas or muqayyad, which are very similar but different terms, which define the specific exception for those things. So what you've defined is, okay, the Quran says, وَلَا تُنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. Okay, don't marry the polytheists until they believe. وَلَا أَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ, and the ayah goes on, is خَيْرٌ مِنْ, is better than the one who's is not a polytheist, and even if you like her. But then in Surah Al-Ma'idah, it says that you can marry this. So that's the exception. You can marry Jews and Christians. That is the exception. For men, that is the exception, not for women. Women cannot marry Jews and Christians, but men can marry Jews and Christians. Okay. Some scholars say today this doesn't apply because of the issues said the dhara'a and so on and so forth, and some discussions. That's aside the point. But from a consistency perspective, there's no contradiction.
Yeah.
Because it can be harmonized when we talk about generalities and specificities.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna just move on from there, just simply because we have a lot of people. So brother Faisal, because we booted you out earlier, I'm just gonna give
you booted him out. I didn't do nothing.
Well, you're the one who said we spoke to him, so I booted him out.
Fair enough.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, so my question is regarding human history, more or less from the Islamic perspective. There are two texts from the hadith that kind of leave me with some questions. The first one is regarding a hadith that says that Adam alayhi salam, when he was created 60 cubits tall. And Ibn Hajar, he used to interpret this as meaning that he was 60 cubits tall when he was on earth already, and humans declined in height since then.
Yep.
The other point is in regards to the hadith that describe the amount of time between prophets. There are certain hadith which talk about 10 generations being between Adam and Nuh, and another alayhum salam, and another hadith describing another 10 generations between Nuh and Ibrahim alayhum salam. And I find that a bit like confusing when we look at human history from a scientific perspective, obviously. And I would really enjoy if you could comment
So
on that.
I'm actually going to be writing something on this, but I'll give you a brief answer, inshallah. Now, in regards to the what was the first point that you made on the height of Adam alayhi salam? That's something which I'm not going to address now. That's something which I want to write about, because that's something that could easily go wrong.
We're going to make a video about that as well, by the way.
With the second point, I've covered this a few times in the past, but again, inshallah, this is something I'm going to be writing about. What it is that when we say human as Muslims, we simply mean Bani Adam. That's what we mean. But when a scientist says human, they will include Homo erectus, Homo naledi, Denisovans, anything within the, anything hominid. They would just say, right, this is human. So when it comes to us, humans, from their perspective, we go back millions of years, at least 2 million years, right? Hundreds of thousands, definitely our species of human. But from a Islamic Quranic perspective, we believe in the creation of Adam alayhi salam being a miraculous creation, and the human beings alive today being part of that. Now, prior to that, or maybe at the same time, there were other hominid type things that existed. That's possible. That's not. I mean, there's no textual evidence that goes against that. But why do we actually believe that all of human beings today are actually creations and they're not part of the same line of humans from the perspective that scientists speak about? Is because we believe in the miracle of Adam alayhi salam. And the miracle of Adam alayhi salam, as Allah says in the Quran, is like that of Isa. So we say as Muslims, and I've covered this in my debate with Aaron Ra and a few other times as well, we say, okay, Homo erectus, these other things, they existed, but we say that our lineage begins with Adam alayhi salam. What was the exact time? Again, that's something which I believe there is some work which has been done on this. I don't think it's sufficient enough yet, and that's something, inshallah, that I'm looking to develop as well. Yeah. But I'm not going to give you a longer answer than that, because that's usually the way I
add something to this. There are some, just on both of the things that you've mentioned. In terms of the Ibn Hajar taking the view that it was on this earth, there are some riwayas that say it was in the heaven, by the way, in Fis Sama'. Now, because we're doing a video on this, I want to save that to the video that we're going to do, and we're going to put on Sapient Thoughts.
What I found in regards to this, at least to the issue of the height, right, is that Ibn Battal used to interpret this hadith in a different way. which might be interesting to you just for your research. I've discussed this issue with Farid once. It's quite some time ago. So that might be interesting to you, just so you know. But I don't remember how he interpreted.
I remember actually seeing a riwayah within it that he's situna dhira'an, 60 cubits, and then it says something like fis sama, where Allah created him in the heaven. Now I have to check this, because if this is the case, and this is where I have to double check it before I give you an answer of the riwayah, and I have to take it to the people of hadith and see if this is checking up or not. If this is the case, then obviously it solves the issue completely, because we know that the parameters in heaven are completely different to the parameters on the earth. So that would be one way. But the other instance that you mentioned here about between Nuh, what was it you said, between whom and whom?
Nuh and Ibrahim.
Nuh and Ibrahim. Okay, first and foremost, what we have something in the Quran actually, and I just pulled it out because I remember we'll make sure I get the verse. So this is in Surah Al-Furqan, and chapter number 25, verse number 37. It says, وَقَوْمُ نُوحٍ لَمَّا كَذَّبُوا الرُّسُلَ أَغْرَقْنَاهُمْ وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ آيَةً وَأَعْتَدْنَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. And then 38, and this is the crucial part. وَعَادًا وَثَمُودَ وَأَصْحَابَ الرَّسِّ وَقُرُونًا بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ كَثِيرًا. Yeah? So, and Ad and Thamud and the dwellers of Ar-Ras and many generations in between. Now, obviously in the Arabic, kathir is defined in a certain way. So it's actually more than a certain number. I believe it's more than 10. I believe it is more than 10. It could be 10 or more, it could be 9 or more. I think there was a difference of opinion. But that is the extent of it. That's the strongest thing that we have. From Noah, because here, if you look at the verses, what it was saying, right? Look at verse number 37. 37, it says, وَقَوْمَ نُوحٍ. So we have Noah. لَمَّا كَذَّبُوا الرُّسُلَ أَغْرَقْنَاهُمْ وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ آيَةً. And we made them for the people a sign. Yeah? وَأَعْتَدْنَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. Okay, so you have here, it's talk about Noah. So the first thing that was mentioned was whom? Was Noah. وَعَادًا وَثَمُودَ وَأَصْحَابَ الرَّسِّ وَقُرُونًا بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ كَثِيرًا. So if we're talking, if the بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ here is referring to between Noah and Thamud and Ad, we have more than 10 generations. In terms of the riwayat that you may have, I don't know what the riwayat you may have, but obviously between Adam and Nuh, I don't think there's anything authentic.
Yeah, I also heard that this hadith might have some weakness in it.
Yes, I don't think between Adam and Nuh there's anything authentic. Once again, I have to do the research again, but from what I remember, from Adam until Nuh, there's nothing authentic. And so usually what people take is and I remember this because I was reading it in Al-Bidayah al-Nihaya of Ibn Kathir. And when he starts talking about the prophets, he starts saying that Noah, the son of this person, the son of this person, and he uses the Bible. Now, why would he use the Bible if there was a riwayah that was sahih? It would make no sense to me. So if he's using the Israeliyat, that would, for me, be an indication that he's trying to fill in gaps. So I don't know of anything, not a muhaddith, but I don't know of anything authentic between Adam and Nuh. And this is the major bone of contention. We don't know when Adam was. But we know that he was a miraculous creation. And one more thing I want to add, and this is something Abdullah Andalusi actually said, and I think it was a beautiful way of the whole Darwinian thing, or the whole evolution thing really being put into perspective, and kind of adds to what you were saying. He said, look, Abdullah Andalusi, I'm going to give him credit for this because he said this. And when he said it, it was like the penny dropped. Wallah, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful way to, I have to give him the credit for it. He said, look, Isa alayhi salam, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
He had a clay bird, and then he blew into it, and he made it into a live bird. Do you know this in the Quran? Mentioned, yeah? Okay. Now that bird that he blew into, if we were now that bird that was once clay, and then he blew the ruh, or the فَيَنْفُخُ فِيهِ فَيَكُونَ طَيْرًا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. For he blew into it, and it became an actual bird. That bird, if we had it, the living specimen of the bird, and we dissected it and whatever, and we looked at it, would we be able to classify it?
Yeah.
We would be able to classify it in terms of what was it, a pigeon, and it's in this family and that family, whatever. But in reality is,
it has an independent origin.
It was spontaneously created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
Through whom? Through Isa alayhi salam.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is in the Quran already and it's talking about spontaneous creation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of a bird that would have been classified in a family tree with other birds, then min bab awla, you could say that the same thing with the human being. Yes, you could be able to classify a human being as being a hominid and this and that and whatever, primate and whatever the technical terms are. You'll know more than I do. I don't want to say something wrong here. If I'm saying something wrong, please.
No. You're spot on so far.
Yeah. So but we're able to classify it just like we're able to classify the bird.
It's a simple argument,
we believe. Look at the creation story of Adam. It's a miraculous story. He was created in heaven. He was this big, and then he was sent to the. Yani, look at the Hajar al-Aswad. Al-Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone. Once again, if you pull out the black stone from the Kaaba, will you be able to put it under a microscope and see some minerals there?
It'll fit. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll fit certain things. Like, okay, this is this and whatever. Yani. But the truth of the matter is, this black stone came from heaven, we believe.
And another way of thinking about it, and this is a beautiful, I mean, he gave the example of the bird. Many years ago, Sheikh Abdul Rahim Green was asked this question, and he gave the example of Isa alayhi salam.
Yeah.
He said, if you took out the genetics of Isa alayhi salam, you would say, here's the father, here's the mother, here's this, here's that. But we know he had no father.
It's brilliant.
And Allah says in the Quran, the similitude of Isa is like Adam.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting that new atheists hate both of them. they're normally ex-Christians and Darwinists, right? So they don't believe in Adam either. So the affirmation in terms of the miraculousness of Adam alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam is about their independent origin. Like, it wasn't like, they were completely a natural part of the process. And this is exactly why one point cannot be missed out. Now, I don't usually recommend certain books on evolution, because what ends up happening is, if you just give people, okay, go read this book on evolution, then they come back a bit more confused because they don't know how to refute it. And, you've just thrown it out there. But there's some really, really good books. Philip Johnson's book, Darwin on Trial, in that book, and it's old, it's like 25 years old now, he makes the argument the fundamental problem between Darwinists and theists is not human chimpanzee, is not genetics, anatomy, psychology, linguistics, is none of that, fossil record. It is theism or naturalism. Because if you come with a lens of theism, Adamic creation is possible. But if you come with a lens of naturalism, methodological naturalism, a priori, meaning before evidence, it's impossible that Adam alayhi salam existed. So it's not the case that Darwinists have great evidence and it's all about evidence. No, the very lens of naturalism from which they start the scientific journey, it rules out Adam alayhi salam, it rules out any of these things. And what's beautiful about this is Thomas Nagel recently as in just last 10 years, he published this book, Mind and Cosmos, and he openly states that, the Darwinian story is not just evidence. It actually starts off with a priori philosophical lens, and that obviously has implications. So that's extremely important to keep in mind here as well when it comes to the creation of Adam alayhi salam. But we've covered this quite a bit. Let's move on to some other people, and I'm going to get Hijab.
By the way, I'm a good friend of Wasim. I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Who?
Wasim from Islamabad. It's a guy you have met at the university there. He helped you with some stuff. Maybe you've forgotten about him.
Say his name again.
Wasim.
Oh, yes, Wasim, yes, of course. MashaAllah, yeah. Very good, brother.
Greetings to the brother when he sees
try and keep tabs. Jazakallah khair, brother Faisal.
Wa alaikum salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam. So we're going to go to brother Imran next. And then...
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Wa alaikum salam.
First of all, I would like to thank you for your work. It's really got me close to the deen. And my question, it's kind of relevant to the last guy's question. He asked about Prophet Adam alayhi salam's height. I'm asking about Nuh alayhi salam's age, because we know from the Quran it's 950 years.
Yeah.
And the history suggests that our age expectancy has gotten higher with medicine, but 950 years doesn't really make sense.
Okay, so
to what we know. So
yeah,
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, there's a very simple way of answering that. Our age expectancy has gone up in the last couple of 100 years because of medicine, because of a lack of warfare, more peaceful society, so on and so forth. But that says nothing about what would have happened, what did happen much earlier than that. So you have to remember the data is just for the recent times. Now, of course, scientists are just going to go by that. Now, when it comes to the fossil record, somebody can turn around and say, well, why don't we have a situation in which we have some fossils of humans who lived for a very long time, and why don't we have data for that? The important thing to keep in mind is fossilization is extremely rare. It is like lightning hitting a piece of land. It is so rare that actually today, we can openly say this is stats according to the National Science Foundation, 99.999% of species, not organisms, species that ever existed on Earth, they no longer exist, and we do not have their fossils, we don't have their DNA, we don't have the slightest idea of what they look like. The whole reason why the age of Nuh alayhi salam has become an issue, or why people try to use it as an issue, is because of the misunderstanding of how good a fossil record would have been, and that record should be able to give us certain evidence, and it's not actually giving us that evidence. And the other thing to keep in mind is that at the time of Nuh alayhi salam, we're talking about the early generation of the Adamic line, that the human population was very low. And so if it's the case that, for example, there are people alive today, there are billions of people alive today who have, you could say, mongoloid type features, not billions, hundreds of millions, mongoloid type features. You get this in what's it called, Uzbekistan, in Tajikistan, and of course Mongolia, certain parts of China. And so we can find fossils and we can say, okay, these are mongoloid type people, right? Because there's so many of them, and obviously some are going to fossilize. But when you have such an early generation of the Adamic line and the population is quite low, then not only is fossilization rare, the chances for fossilization in that demographic is going to compound the unlikelihood of finding such fossils. So what's important to keep in mind here is that understanding the way that science works in terms of fossilization, basically paleontology, and how imperfect the fossil record is, that completely undermines the argument that this is not possible, because this whole idea that human beings were living very short lives until just recently, again, that has a whole bunch of presuppositions, and we can challenge it in the way that I mentioned.
And moreover, the Quran doesn't say he lived for 950 years. It actually says he done da'wah for 900.
So he could have lived longer. Could have been 3,000 years.
It says, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا. We have certainly sent Noah to his people, so he stayed in there with them for 1,000 years minus 50, which is 950. So that's him doing that. But the fact that Allah mentions it, and he doesn't mention how long, any other prophet, from my quick scan, any other prophet stayed in their people, would suggest to me that it's unusual, that it was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maybe bestowed to him that he didn't bestow to other prophets, which is an extremely long life, because of the fact that there was maybe an early community, and this we're talking about before the cradle of the earth was even established. We're talking before Mesopotamia. We're talking before
civilization,
Egyptian civilization existed. So we're talking about really early stuff. We don't know when. We actually don't know when. So the fact that was the case, there would have been a very scarce population, and maybe a centralized population, all of it probably in the Middle East, what was referred to in historical terms as the cradle of the earth. And therefore, one person would have been sufficient, but they just needed a very long space of time. So it's possible. It's right. And the fact that, by the way, the fact that Noah, he says something in Surah An-Nuh. He says that انتظرهم يضلوا عبادك ولا يلدوا إلا كافرا فاجرا. I can't forget the ayah, but he says that they will not give birth to anyone except for
disbelievers.
يعني someone who's a transgressor or fasiq or fajr, and a disbeliever, kafara. So why did he say this? It's very unusual because not when the Prophet talks about them giving birth to other people. So the idea that he mentioned that their followers would give birth to disbelievers could be from experience, because he's seen generations. He's seen all these generations.
He's done a sociological analysis,
a longitudinal study, because he saw, what is it? Kafiran fajjara. Shukran. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jazakallah khair, brother Imran.
Thank you.
I'm gonna add Ahmed Hossam. I need to go pray now, and I'm gonna leave you guys in the safe hands of Hijab. So Ibrahima, then Ibrahim.
How do I
no, you don't need to do anything. You can just say next is Ibrahima, and then they'll talk, and then you say next.
What do I do?
You don't do anything.
No, but they're
okay. They'll unmute themselves.
Okay then.
Yeah.
All right.
Go on.
All right. Ibrahima. How you doing, brother?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Okay, so, all right, here's my question. In my area, people are really left-leaning. And of these kind of people, there is a Muslim named Mari Turner. She represents Oklahoma in the Senate and identifies gender-wise as a non-binary person, despite being a female. When I debate people now, it usually consists of liberals that believe in the idea of a surplus of genders. My question to Mohammed Hijab, knowing that you deal with liberals often, is how should I Islamically or generally disprove the idea of more than two genders?
Well, I mean, we believe in intersex. We don't have an issue with that. It's just, for me, my interaction, like, for example, I was in the gender studies department for about a year in SOAS University, and I remember having a conversation with somebody, and I had this conversation. I was like, we had seminars, and obviously, like, a lot of the people were there and they're talking and stuff. And one person said to me, she was obviously like gender fluid or whatever. She believed that most of it was a social construction, and she said, "I believe that the penis is a social construction." That's what she said to me. I was like, "Oh, is that what you believe?" She says, "Yeah, I believe that the penis is a social construction." And her peers were like nodding along and this and that. I was thinking, okay, so if you believe that the penis is a social construction, I remember that. I was like, yeah. So do you believe rape is a social construction? And I was like, and that's when the penny dropped, because if you start saying all these things are social constructions, it opens up the Pandora box of ridiculousness. So you have to show them the extent to which what they believe in undermines like core values and certain things that they would probably believe in within their framework of liberalism, which is in this case like racism or sexism or rape or whatever it may be. So you have to start, and that's, if you watch I know it was a controversial discussion, but with the transgender hijabi, I was trying to show that particular transgender hijabi that if biology becomes socially constructed, then racism becomes a non-issue, because in as much the same way as you want to say that there's two genders and that they're socially constructed, we can say the same thing about race. And once we do that, then we eliminate racism, because there's no such thing as racism if there's no such thing as race. And it's from those kinds of, you need to establish from them what they accept as socially constructed and what they accept as objectively true. And whatever they accept as socially constructed, show them, and you have to find out if it's race, if it's gender, whatever it is, show them that how they believing in that causes more problems for them than it causes solutions. In much the same way as I've kind of tried to show right now. So I would go down that route, Brima. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And even in my civics class, they're trying to teach us that race is a social construction.
So then tell them, so you're saying there's no such thing as racism, and that there was no such thing as race-based slavery, because if race is a social construction, it doesn't actually exist in the real world. And show them the ridiculousness of that. And yeah, I mean, if you're saying that, then there's no such thing as oppression to black people. There's no such thing as this, and then they'll start seeing the ridiculousness of it, and you'll get some people on your side, and then you can move on from there, bro.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I talk to my mom about you a lot.
Yeah, tell her to make dua for me as well.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Bro.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. Ahmad Hussam. Oh, actually, Ahmad Hussam. Let's go with Ahmad first, and then Ibrahim was next.
Assalamu alaikum, Mohammed Hijab.
Alaikum salam. How you doing, brother?
Very well. Now, William Lane Craig once made a video talking about why he thinks that the Muslim concept of God fails. He goes on to say that he thinks that the Muslim concept of God fails because he thinks that the Muslim concept of God is not the greatest conceivable being, because he thinks that the greatest conceivable being would be an all-loving. His love would be unconditional, impartial, and universal. And then he goes on to say that the love of the Quran, the God in the Quran, is partial, conditional, and is not universal, as you have to earn it as a Muslim. And then he goes on to say, because God does not love sinners in the Quran. William Lane Craig ended the video by saying that he thinks that the concept of God in Islam is morally inadequate. How would you respond to that?
Well, we have a paper that's coming out, and Dr. Ahmad Latif has written an extensive paper, and I think he's even doing an accompanying seminar. So I would just defer it to that, because I feel like William Lane Craig has the excuse of being my academic senior in not engaging with me. He can say that I'm his academic senior, I'm double his age. In fact, he's more than double my age, the guy is. So I know whatever I say now, it's not really going to get his attention. Whereas Dr. Ahmad Latif is on the same level as him, really, academically. Like, he's got the same kind of credentials. Maybe he has not been around for as long, but they're both kind of colleagues, and they would be colleagues in the same kind of. So I feel like that kind of alleviates him from being able to make excuses for engaging with that kind of polemic. So I want to defer that to Dr. Ahmad Latif's his seminar and his accompanying paper, which is being reviewed now, and is actually going to be a complete dismantling of William Lane Craig's. But if you want to watch something for the night time or tomorrow or something like this, then you can see the podcast I've done with Hamza Zulsis, because we talk about that actually in there.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, bro.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazak. Ibrahim.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question, you're probably tired of hearing this already. You've heard this a lot, but I have a question concerning philosophy, right? Because I want to go into, because you guys use philosophy for the purposes of refuting.
Yeah.
Right. But there's always risks to using it, right? As we've seen throughout Islamic history.
Yes.
So I would like an explanation as to how do we avoid assimilating the two. For example, you may use an argument to say, so Subboor may use an argument from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
But it's obviously this may be contrary to Islam. So how do we avoid assimilation between philosophy, ideas we use as, just for the sake of argumentation?
I've got a really beautiful quotation here from Ibn Taymiyyah, which is from Minhaj al-Sunnah. I haven't actually said this before to someone. He says, وَأَمَّا نَفِي الْفَلْسَفَةَ مُطْلَقًا أَوْ إِثْبَاتُهَا فَلَا يُمْكِنُ. He says that if you want to kind of negate philosophy altogether, or if you want to affirm all of it, then either of those two approaches are not possible. Yeah. He says, إذ ليس للفلسفة مذهب معين. So it's not one particular. It's not like one school of thought that you can just. I'm going to share it right now for the Arabic-speaking audiences, and they can hopefully translate it, because a lot of people they argue on lines, and they get these kind of quotations from Shafi'i translations. I'm going to tweet this. I'll put it on Twitter. Okay, it's very nice. Check it out, inshallah. Is that right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Jazakallah, my brother Ibrahim. next we go to Usman.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How are you doing, Brother Usman?
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for your time. My question is, considering the pandemic and the what's been going on in the past year, bearing that in mind, like overnight, my family, a large segment of my family, a lot of Muslims that I know, some of them who are actually grounded within our tradition, have become conspiracy theorists. And I just wanted to ask that, to what extent like principles or tools that we have within the Islamic tradition, such as following the scholars, people that have the knowledge, following the consensus, so not just scholars, but following the consensus of the scholars, not questioning people's integrity, like having such severe skepticism where you think everybody's evil and doubting the integrity. And these kind of principles, to what extent should we apply these principles to basically all other aspects of our lives?
Yeah, so Brother Usman, I would say that, sorry, that question we can't answer because it's not relevant to our remit, because we have a lot of questions in regards to doubts about Islam. But this is something that maybe you can send to Hijab on his Instagram and he can answer it there if you want. But it's not something that's relevant to the live stream, so I won't, like, I don't want to address that.
Okay, then.
Would you like to ask a different question about doubt?
To be honest, the only other question I would have, if within the same remit, was, for example, how do we understand that when Adam alayhi salam, or humanity comes from him, then how do we understand how we became so many from just two? Like, how did they basically have children and have more children within the same family unit?
Well, within the narrations that we have, we know that it was a case of the children of Adam alayhi salam. I believe it's a case that you had two twins, and then one married the other. I don't remember the exact.
I don't know if there was a narration on that. I think that's what people inferred. They
inferred from it, but it was because remember, the moral variables are different, because morality from an Islamic perspective is objective. So under a moral variable, like right now in the UK, eating pork is haram, right, for a Muslim. However, if I was starving in a desert, then eating pork would be halal. So the classic Islamic narrative on this, and I don't believe there's any disagreement in terms of Muslim scholarly opinion on this, was that this was something that the children of Adam alayhi salam intermarried. That's the standard line that's always actually been accepted. I don't know of any difference of opinion. And then how did they actually, from such a small number, become so large? That's just, survival and reproduction over a long period of time. In fact, today, if we look at something like the children of Genghis Khan, there's literally tens of millions of people who So how people can split. And also, I just wanted to say something else as well. In a colony, and I know Hijab, I love this. In a colony, all of the ants are actually siblings. They all have the same, all of them, right? So, this whole idea of, how can there be so many, and how could they start off, and how could they all be siblings? Well, we have ants and we have colonies, and this is exactly what takes place in nature. So it's not. I mean, it's not inconceivable. And obviously, even from a methodological naturalistic point of view, which I spoke about earlier, they'll have to come to a similar sort of answer anyway. Of course, because everything goes back to simplicity, right? So small numbers becoming into large numbers, and yeah, that's the way I'd address your question. But I'm sorry, I didn't answer the other question, even though it's okay. Even though it's very tempting, I couldn't answer the other question. I'm sorry.
No, I really appreciate it. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, brother. So let's go to Brother Sirosh Butt.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. Is my voice clear?
Walaikum salam. Yes, it is, Brother Sirosh.
Okay, this is such. I'm literally talking to you guys. Okay, okay. So my question is basically, my brother is about to marry a person in our family, right? So it's related to the topic. I'll tell you this why. Because I recently, debating with an atheist. So he was almost convinced about a lot of things. He was accepting a lot of answers. He was posting. He was basically
Sorry,
sending.
brother. Sorry, Brother Sirosh. You're very choppy. It's very hard to understand what you're saying.
Okay,
Your internet connection. Can I? I'm just going to remove you and re-add you. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you speak now?
Sure.
Can you speak? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but I think my voice is not clear for you, right?
No, it's a little bit choppy. Maybe if you can ask your question, but ask it a bit slower because you're speaking quite fast and you couldn't understand you.
Okay, so my question is, an atheist asked me a question and also sended me a documentary. Okay, can I write the question over here in the chat box over here?
Yeah, that'll be better.
The chat box in Zoom in this StreamYard, right?
Sorry, yeah, just write it in the chat. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair, brother. So let's go to Brother Hani, and when we get Sirosh's question, we will address that as well, inshallah. Brother Hani, he needs a Scooby snack, so he's gone. Let's go to Brother Jawad.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Brother Jawad.
Yeah, so I have a question about following school of thought, and I joined this. I just saw this this broadcast, so I don't know the topic, but I had a question about following school of thought.
Yeah, that's not within the remit of this podcast. This live stream. We're speaking about doubts about Islam, and if anybody has a question, but about madhabs, a general Islamic question is not something we answer.
Okay, so can I ask another question instead of it?
Yeah, that's fine. You can ask another question if it's related to doubts about Islam.
Yeah, my second question was to what extent a normal Muslim who is not a full-time dai or who has not done his time to learn the comparative religion to engage with non-Muslims, especially living in US, to what extent we should engage with Christian, especially because that's the bigger population, where we actually do the more damage than actually put forward the right Islam in front of them. Because when you talk to coworker, and it's
Yeah, so brother, I would answer this question quite briefly because it's a very common question. The first thing is that you should obviously gain knowledge, and it's not the case that we don't have enough time for it or we can't. Everybody's capable of it, and if anything's important, then you get it done. The other thing is that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Convey from me, even if it's one verse." So you may not need to get into a deep theological discussion with a Christian about the Trinity, but at least you can share with them a few Quranic verses, give them a free booklets, pamphlets, whatever it is. Every Muslim has a duty upon them to, when they get the opportunity, that if people want to know about Islam, that they should speak to them, and even if they don't want to know about Islam, they should try to create that that atmosphere. And I would say, don't worry too much about, I need to have an extraordinary level of knowledge to actually give dawah. IERA actually has a very good basic dawah training course that you can attend. And we've just updated it. And once you go through it, you'll be able to easily speak to a Christian, a Jewish person, or whoever else is out there, inshallah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, moved him a bit quick. Jazakallah khair, Brother Jawad, for joining us. Okay, next is somebody called Hani. Hani, can you hear us now?
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I just have a question about evolution. What's the best evolutionary model that we can reconcile with Islamic belief?
Sorry, brother Hani, your audio was not good. We're just making room for other people. Brother Ryan. Actually, before Ryan, there's another brother called Brother. Sorry, I need to add him first. There's a brother called Brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you guys hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, we can.
And just one thing, Sarosh, but I think you kicked him out of the room. I don't think he can type his question. But just getting to my question. So, Jazakallah for taking the time to answer. Just going back to the comments you had about the scientific miracle. I mean, just like yourself, I grew up, watching Dr. Zakir Naik and reading the books, and recently, I came across your work and Ustad Hamza's and everyone else's, and it's convinced me otherwise, that we shouldn't be looking for conviction through scientific miracles of the Quran. But the underlying principle is that we as Muslims are looking for that conviction, right? So, because we, subhanAllah, we have a lot of profound things that we believe in, like, the miracle birth of Adam as salam, Isa as salam, and all the things that brothers have brought up today. So when people say, the conviction in all of that is rooted in what people say the Quran, the miraculous nature of the Quran. So what I've been trying to do for the last little while, and I've been browsing Sapience Institute and all these other videos, is I am absolutely convinced of the Quran, but how do we further build on that conviction? Like, what is it that we must do to go like this book, this subhanAllah, this miracle that we have is no doubt the miracle? And I know it's a weird, complicated question, but I just wanted to understand what one could do.
I mean, there's obviously the intellectual arguments. We've got a book called The Eternal Challenge that summarizes the arguments quite well. But I would say it's not just about the intellectual stuff. That will take you to the point that Islam is true, but it will not take you to the point of making Islam the absolute proof in your life, and you want to live it. I mean, something can be true, but it doesn't change you. It doesn't impact you. It doesn't change your very DNA. And that is simply the worship of Allah, which does that. So acting upon Islam, living Islam. In fact, some people skip the intellectual journey entirely and just try to worship Allah, and they reach the same level that somebody that first uses the intellect and then submits to Allah.
Is it okay if it just refer brother or Mohammed Hijab? So like I watched one of your podcasts where you said that you went on this journey to go and study the Quran and learn the Quran, and then you said you were absolutely convinced. You said if anyone gives you that Quran, you would have believed that person just because of how you convinced you were the Quran. So I mean, everyone's journey could be different, but I just wanted to understand, just advice for brothers in general, what could they do to increase that conviction of the Quran, inshallah? Yeah.
I think, you started off with talking about the scientific stuff. We don't negate the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about naturalistic phenomena. And we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in a way which will be facilitative for 7th century audiences all the way up to 21st century audiences. And that in itself is if there's going to be anything that relates to naturalistic phenomena that we want to call the miracle, is that facilitation, is that propensity to facilitate for all those generations in between, and in the future. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and by the way, with this, I believe that Islam as an ancient religion is unique in this, because if you look at the Midrash, which is the ancient Jewish commentaries of the Old Testament, for example, and even if you look at patristic exegeses of the New Testament and the Old Testament, because some of the church fathers and ecclesiastic writers like Origen of Alexandria and others, they actually wrote Augustine wrote an exegesis on Genesis. Many of them did, right? And if you look at how they interact with both them and the Old Testament, there's basically no interpretation. Just to take one example, like the flatness of the earth, that was consensus. I mean, the real rotundity of the earth only came about maybe from Augustine's time onward because of Aristotelian logic, for instance, and because of Aristotelian or Greek influence. It wasn't that anybody ever looked at any verse in the in the Bible and said that verse indicates that the earth is round. I don't think there's anything like that. They believe it's round because of the Greek influence. So that's one thing. We have precedent Like when we say that, for example, the cosmology that we believe in today is a cosmology which is concurrent. We have precedent going all the way back to the Salaf, that people saying, you know, X, Y, Z about the universe or the earth or whatever it may be, which will be concurrent with 21st century cosmological understandings. That is not afforded, to other ancient texts. So I think that in itself is already a defining thing. So we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think, when it comes to naturalistic stuff. And with the scientific miracles thing, we just believe that the argument has been framed incorrectly.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been known at the time, or this or that. These phrases have gotten us in trouble for the last 20 years because they are not sophisticated from an academic perspective. Right, so that's number one. Number two, in terms of, for me anyways, personally, like when I started to memorize the Quran and read it and stuff, I just started to, I know it sounds a bit weird, but I started, number one, I started to listen into the flow of it and stuff. And when I compared it with what I knew of Arabic poetry and stuff like that, and other Arabic speech, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was something like, it was an intuition that I knew this was completely different. But it was about, how do I measure that now? Quantitative. How do I put that into it? So I started reading books of I'jaz and Dala'il and stuff like that in Arabic, which is plenty, like the structures of the, and now a lot of it has been translated into English, like Raymond Farron with the structures of scientific cohesion. In Arabic, there's one called Tartib al-Quran by Suyuti and stuff like that. And he's talking about how the Quran is all interlaced and perfectly like structured and stuff, despite it being piecemeal revelation and stuff like that. The fact, like, for example, I remember when back in the days, I was memorizing Surah Mujadila, and I was just reciting, and I realized, well, every single ayah has the word Allah in it. And I found that as a revelation. I looked at it myself and I thought, this is unbelievable, because in the middle of that surah I was like, استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله. That Quran, he surrounded them and he made them forget the mention of Allah. And it's like Allah is trying to get us to remember. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because the shaitan is trying to get us to forget. And I'm thinking, wow, man, like this is a Tory speech. And in every single ayah, because there was only like maybe, I don't know, 40 ayahs in that surah.
Right.
Every single ayah has got the word Allah in it. Like, how can you program that into your oral communication if you want to, you're making all these arguments and you're shifting from one subject to the other, and you're putting the word Allah is very, very, very difficult to do. And I realized that these subtleties existed throughout the Quran. So then it was a matter of trying to see who spoke about this in similar terms. And I realized there was a rich literature from all the way back, from the Mufassirun, like Al-Razi in his tafsir, he starts talking about this. Al-Zamakhshari in his Kashaf, he talks about this. And everyone's talking about this. It's like live discussion about how the Quran is a mu'jiza, as how it's a miracle. And I thought that basically intellectually is very, very satisfying for me anyway.
Oh, Jazakallah. If I could just give one quick feedback. Your Sapience Institute videos, the ones you put out, mashallah, they're great. I love them. But I have to listen to them on 0.5, 0.75 speed because mashallah, you speak so fast.
I feel very sorry for you.
If you could... No, I...
telling me off about that. I said you have to slow it down after that.
Yeah, just for the benefit of everyone watching, and if you could throw sometimes some visuals up on the screen just so it's easier to follow for the brothers, because I have to watch it multiple times, and I've read the comments to say the same thing. But just call up for your time.
If
I'll do that.
If you find that tough, I tried reading Hijab's book on feminism, and I had this hubris. I mean, I studied philosophy. I'll be able to understand this. I looked at it and it looked at me and I was like, this is not for me.
I read a couple of your essays on Darwinian and evolution. I felt the same way.
I was just watching Brother Subboor's webinar on Darwinism last night. Mashallah, it was really good.
Mashallah, brilliant. We also have the Sapience Institute learning portal. So you can also go there to learn some stuff, inshallah. May Allah bless you, brother, for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Brother Huzaifa. Actually, no, Rayan. Brother Rayan is next.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
Are you aware of any good arguments against deism?
Deism? What do you mean?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just telling Hijab that. Something.
Yeah. a non-intervening God. That
So deism. Obviously, mashallah, Hijab can give you a thorough answer on that. But just to sort of save time, Brother Bassam Zawadi has actually published on deism, and when I read it, it was honestly the best thing I have ever seen. I'm not even talking about from a Muslim.
Really?
Even from like a Christian or whoever. It's just something he's published on academia.edu. I think it's the only thing that I've read of his, but I mean, that was the best refutation.
What's he saying? Give us some.
Okay, so I'll give you an argument. The argument that he was like, what we do in our Go Rap is we speak about how it's basically part of Allah's wisdom, that Allah speaks to us, and Bassam just really puts that in an academic way. I would say for the purposes of the questioner, it's sufficient that the idea that Allah created everything and just left it to run by itself would basically mean Allah is doing something superfluous, that there's no meaning, there's no foresight, there's no end goal. And that's obviously not part of perfection. Part of perfection would be that you would do things for a reason. You wouldn't just do stuff without any justification at all. So that's what we need to keep in mind when it comes to deism. Deism, I believe, is actually quite popular. It's a lot more popular than I think atheism. I think atheists are loud, deists are not loud, but I think there are actually a lot of deists out there. How would you address deism?
I think what you said is right. And obviously there's so many verses in the Quran that actually attack deism. That Allah has not created this heaven and earth for play and amusement, and if he wanted to, he would have taken a monk from among himself something to do for idle time and so on. So these actually, I always believe that the verses of the Quran are the best, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he created heavens and earth bil haqq, in truth. Now, if he's mudabbir al-kawn, if he is the one who's meant to be maintaining the kawn or the existence, why would he be aloof to it? Like, how can you be? And this is actually kind of a paradox. If you're sustaining something or maintaining it, it kind of disqualifies you from being aloof from it. Because if do you see what I'm trying to say? If we can establish, I think from the best logical way is if we establish that Allah or the necessary existence, say the necessary existence is it's pre-eternal and post-eternal, and they are necessary, therefore everything depends upon him, and so on, all those things that we know from the contingency argument, that the assumption is that everything needs him in order to continue. And if everything needs him in order to continue, that means he is by logical necessity always present in the running of the universe. So he's not leaving the universe.
Yeah.
So the only exception that deists will have to make is for the human being. So Allah is maintaining everything, and then the idea is that the human being, these sentient creatures now, they're just left like that.
Yeah.
Which for me would be completely like, they would have to explain that. Why is that the case?
That's a good point. You're putting the onus on them.
Yeah, the onus would have to be on them, because if this necessary existence, if we get them to a point of saying that everything depends upon him and always, and that he's maintaining it and sustaining it always, then the question is, then he is involved always. And if he's always involved, then that's involvement is personality, if you like. Is him being personally involved.
Yeah.
And so if he's involved and he's personally involved, then this idea of deism already is like 90% gone. Now you have to ask the question, why would the human being be the exception to the rule of everything being maintained? How could the human being be the exception to the rule? And there's a beautiful ayah in the Quran, man, in Surah At-Tawbah, which goes like this, which goes, let me get there. Allah malja'a min Allah illa ilayh. Yeah, this is such a powerful, we were talking about the expressions of the Quran. There's no refuge, and basically it's talking about these three people that were there were three people that were left behind, and then
the earth was constricted.
And then it says And then it says this beautiful phrase which says that they thought that there was no malja'a, there was no refuge from Allah except to Him.
To Him, yeah. Subhanallah.
So they knew that there was no malja, there was no refuge from Allah except for Him. So in other words, we are forced to be in a relationship with Allah by virtue of the fact that He created and is maintaining, and there's nowhere we can go where Allah is not in control, basically. And if that's the case, we're forced to be in a relationship. The deism is basically untenable from that angle.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Brother Ryan, Jazakallah khair for joining us.
Jazakallah. That was exactly the understanding I had. I just want you to infer me some academic paper so I can check them. Thank you. Jazakallah.
Yeah, Bassam Zawadi's paper. Definitely read that, inshallah. Okay, so we also have Brother Huzaifa and Marai. I just want to check, is M. Casper a non-Muslim? Because we want to give non-Muslims a priority.
I'm a Muslim, akhi, alhamdulillah.
Okay, I just saw the word Casper, so I thought
my name is Muslim.
maybe it was Marmaduke Casper. I don't know. N stands for. Okay, so Brother Huzaifa, over to you. Welcome to Sapience Institute Live. What is your question?
Welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I think in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that the mountains move. How could we scientifically explain that?
Mountains move, or which verse are you talking about?
I don't really remember. Yeah, kind of that.
What the mountains move, or that the mountains ألقى في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بكم.
You might. Are you referring to where Allah is referring to the Day of Judgment?
Surah Al-Naml.
Yeah, the mountains will remove from their places.
Yeah. This is Surah Al-Naml. I think that's the only place where people say this, where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says. وَالْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدًا
وهي تمر مر السحاب.
Yeah. So this ayah, Sha'arawi, the Egyptian personality who, mashallah, he done like oral tafsir of the Quran or tadabbur of the Quran. He famously had this belief that this is talking about this dunya. But when I looked into the mas'ala, I looked into the ayah, and the majority of the ulama, they believe this is talking about the Day of Judgment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically the answer.
So it hasn't any regards to the earth plates or anything.
If it was talking about it, then it could be the case that it's talking about the rotations of the earth, because in effect, the earth is spinning around and the mountains are on it. But I don't think this is what it's talking about, because the presentation of the Quran doesn't go into details about the rotation of the earth. It's talking about, in the Quran, وَأَلْقَى فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَن تَمِيدَ بِكُمْ. He put on the earth these mountains so that it doesn't shake. This is more the presentation of the Quran. It's talking about the Qishra Ardiyya. It's not talking that the outer crust of the earth more than the planet Earth itself. And so the question that usually they have is that how could it be talking about? Well, we know that mountains don't do that. They have an objection to that. They say mountains don't cause stability. They cause instability. But the truth of the matter is, I was looking at the science of this, and it's a principle in geology called isoptasy, which is basically the idea that it's talking about stability of the mountains and so on. But the truth of the matter is, isoptasy and its conceptions have changed dramatically over the past 100 years. Like from the 1800s, when this guy Dutton wrote it, and then Jolly, and it's changed over the 100 years. It's changed quite a lot. The truth of the matter is, we don't know what would happen if the mountains were taken out of their place. What would happen? What we know is that, Allahu Alam, I'm not a geologist, by the way. Zahlul Nagdar, he wrote a book on this, isoptasy and so on. To be fair, he's a geologist. He's a geologist, yeah. he wrote a book, like a 90-page document on it, isostasy and so on.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at some of the books, they were saying that when you take out glaciers, because they had this when ice glaciers, they melt.
Yeah.
And they think that when ice glaciers melt, something called uplift takes place, which is basically like instability of that particular earth crust. And so, yeah, there's kalam there, but the truth of the matter is we don't know what would happen if you uproot mountains. The Quranic assumption is that if you uproot a mountain, then there's going to be major instability. That's the assumption, because mountains were meant to be a force for stability. So if you uproot them, there's going to create some huge uplift or something like that.
So, Jazakallah khair, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We've received a question, and I really thought Hijab would be best placed to use the Millsian perspective to address this. So, Sapience Institute: if atheists base their morality on the harm principle, does that mean it's okay to sexually molest a woman that is asleep if she doesn't know what's going on?
No, I think this is a bit crude. Like, I think from a liberal perspective, that's if she doesn't know what's going on. At the end of the day, even liberals, they have like principles. They have their red lines, and I think this would be one of them, because it will be seen as, obviously the three things that they prioritize is wealth, property, and liberty. And so this will be an infringement of freedoms of that person who's asleep.
But that's liberalism. This is asking about the harm principle, and if atheists base their morality just on the harm principle.
No, they don't just. So they don't just do that.
So if we took this question,
it's not a good way to argue, I don't think.
Okay.
They don't just premise it on that. There's a whole section of liberalism which talks about contract law, and consent is huge in liberalism as well. We shouldn't underestimate that.
Sure.
That part of it.
Brilliant. All right, next is Marai.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, wa alaikum assalam, we can.
Okay. My question is regarding the Sharia in the Bible. And I think it's an important question because we tend to use, and I find you guys also using this when making da'wah to the Christian brothers and sisters. So you know how us as Muslims, right? We use the Quran as the criteria of aqidah to distinguish the truth and falsehood in other scriptures, right? Like the Bible, for example. But when it comes, and us Muslims will believe that the aqidah remained the same for all of human history, but the Sharia changed, right? So when it comes to the violent verses in the Bible, like for example, burning your daughter alive, like burning the daughter's priest alive, or when Musa alayhi salam told in the Bible told the go kill the women and take the girls and all this stuff. How do we act? What criteria do we use? How do we actually know that this is something that was fabricated or corrupted, and not the Sharia at the time of Bani Israel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Very good question.
If it's in contradiction with the Quran or Sunnah, then it's fabricated. We would believe it's not something which is correct, because there is that injunction, لا تكذبوهم ولا تصدقوهم, the Prophet that do not belie them and do not agree with them. If something is not, if something the Quran and Sunnah has not spoken about, then remain agnostic about it. Don't speak too much about it. And that's, I think, a mistake sometimes we make. Like, for example, on the issue of the global flood, we will jump into the fact that we say that's a biblical, it's explicit, but it's true, it's explicit in the Bible. But what if in the next 20 or 30 or 50, 100 years, they found out that there was a global flood? Now everyone's going to say that the Quran is talking about a local flood, and the Christians will start rejoicing. But the truth of the matter is, there's nothing clear in the Quran that says either way.
And you know what's beautiful about that point, Hijab, is that we sometimes go with the flow, we go with what's popular, we go with the narrative of the day. But even with this global flood, which for some Muslims it was like, oh, this seems a bit difficult to try and articulate, let's just stick with the local one. Not archaeologically, from a anthropology point of view, we're actually getting evidence that various different human populations which have not interacted they all have this flood myth. This seems to be a common thing. I'm not sure if you know about this.
Gilgamesh
This repeated, even in South America, you get this idea that there was a flood and it took out people, and people tell their children, and there's this ancestral story of this flood, and there's something there. And from a purely what do you call it, sociological point of view, is bizarre, right? For them, because it doesn't make sense. Like, why is this repeated thing coming up in many times? So I hope that principle will help you address these types of questions.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, that what you're talking about are the Israeli riwayat and the stories and the aqidah. But I'm talking about the Sharia laws that are found in the Bible, like the jurisprudence, like burning the daughter of the priest alive.
I get that, but the difference here is, you see, the Sharia is different, but Allah's paradigm is the same. The Sunnah of Allah is the same. Allah does not do injustice to anyone. So when Allah, for example, alcohol, say may have been allowed for certain people and not allowed in our Sharia, hypothetically say, yeah. When it comes to, does Allah do injustice? No. It doesn't matter what the Sharia is for the different generations. Allah doesn't do injustice. When it comes to a situation like, so would Allah have allowed shirk to be normal? No, because Allah does not allow shirk. So the principles of Allah, that would have been the same. The Sharia
and
can
also
be,
one more thing to add to that. Most of the ulama of Islam, with very few exceptions, they believe the isma of the prophets, meaning the infallibility.
What does that mean? Oh,
Meaning the infallibility of the prophets. So stories which say that David, he committed adultery, or that Lot had sex with his daughters, we would reject those because it goes against our principle of isma. It goes up against our principle of infallibility, because it's inconceivable that, without darura, without a necessity, like whether there's not going to be continuation of generations, like in the case of Adam and so on, that such things can be done by prophets. So that's another way we can argue that certain things go against the sins of the prophets. We can safely say that the prophets didn't commit, especially those major sins like adultery and stuff like that. Hasha lillah, we would say that completely. We negate that, even though there's nothing directly quote for quote, in opposition, but we still reject this. So, in a nutshell, I wouldn't go too deeply into the jurisprudence, because the truth of the matter is, Allahu a'lam, what was allowed and what wasn't allowed in certain times in certain places. But for those things which are clearly, besmirching the good name of our Prophet, alayhi salam, yes, alayhi salam jami'an, besmirching the good name of our Prophet, so we would completely disagree with that.
Okay, I see.
Pardon me for speaking, but there's some things that Allah says no one bears the sins of another.
Yeah, and also like Allah is not going to hold to account. That's another thing. Like one group of people for us, one group for another person has done. Like a father is not going to be held to account for what the son has done. So there's lots of things that qawaid you can pull out of the Sharia that would negate a lot of the biblical discourse, basically.
Okay, interesting. Just maybe you can clarify on this one point. When you say that, okay, Allah does not deal injustice, right? Well, how do we know what was the injustice at their time? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, there is a gray area there, and that's why we say that in terms of aqidah, we can safely say Allah wouldn't allow shirk, so on and so forth. Like the Prophet said, I don't know who he intervened, that one soul should not be held to account for what another soul has earned. That's another principle, the isma of the prophets, the infallibility of the prophets, and those things which the Quran and all the Sunnah have directly rejected in terms of narratives, like, for example, crucifixion of Jesus or whatever it may be. Those four things will be enough to get rid of like 70 or 80% of the confusing narratives. The remaining 30%, we have to remain agnostic. As the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, "La tusaddiquhum wa la tukadzibūhum." So do not belie them and do not agree with them. Just stay quiet about it, basically, because it can come back to haunt you. You could, like you said, it could be slavery would have been allowed, and someone's attacking the Old Testament talking about slavery, and then maybe it was allowed at that time for a certain period of time. Allahu a'lam, we don't know. Or a different kind of indentured servitude. Allahu a'lam, God knows best. And so I would just remain a little bit agnostic on these issues.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, akhi.
Casper.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Alaikum
First of all, I'd like to say I appreciate what you guys are doing. I benefit a lot from your videos, so on.
Wallah, we benefit from you coming on and sharing your experiences.
Barakallah feekum. But what I want to say, as someone who's interested in philosophy of science, philosophy of biology, and etc., the chances of me going to uni to study these things is very, very low. I'm someone who's like, I'm eager to critique atheism, Darwinism, etc. So how would someone like me go about, researching, studying, and things like that?
Well, wallahi, bro, let me tell you something. Like, we live in a very special time, a very special age. Because the fact of the matter is, wallahi, you can even, you can learn a lot from the comfort of your own home. I was shocked today and yesterday. I was doing some research, and there's a mawqa called the Shamila, like Arabic one, and I was going through all these books, and I was thinking, wow, this 1,000 years ago, someone would have had to travel the lands in order to get the books that I was getting. And I'm thinking, amazing. Like, I can just do it all from the comfort of my own home with my little phone here. It's amazing how much you can. I mean, people attack social media for many good reasons, but we don't talk about the good of the internet. There are some things we can do now that we would never have been able to do back in the days. And so one has to really take that on board and try and do as much as they could do, and whatever, if you're self, like you're studying something yourself, try and find like-minded people, study groups, mentors, teachers, and whatever. Get reading lists. What I would do if I were you, bro, I'd get reading lists from universities, top universities, see their reading list, see their modules, see what they're covering. And if you're doing something like philosophy of science, see what this course structure looks like, and start reading those books yourself. What other things you couldn't go into university and you want to?
I totally agree with what Hijab is saying, and what I'd add to that, actually, I'm sure Hijab would agree to this, is that at university, at university courses, when you go and look up the reading that is provided by the lecturers, it's actually outdated. So many of the readings that you do independently are actually better. So recently, a brother reached out to me, and he said that he wants to do a philosophy of science module at Oxford University. And he sent me it's just one module that he wanted to do. And he said, what do you think about it? And I looked at it and I was a bit surprised, because one of the books was from 2001 and one of the other books was just a couple of years old. And some of the really important books which I came across when I was doing my own studies, they weren't even listed. So, sometimes these lecturers, you have to imagine that they haven't updated the reading list for these courses in dog's years. Yeah. And the stuff that you get on Amazon, with the latest philosophy of science books coming out, they haven't even heard of them because they're still using lecture. I mean, when I was at university, I remember, one particular lecturer, he had notes from years ago that he used to regurgitate. He never updated any of his information.
A lot of them are lazy as well.
Yeah.
No, that's what it is, because you have to go back and
yeah,
you have to go back and change the PowerPoint slides and whatnot. And
can't be bothered. So I totally agree. I mean, that's a beautiful example. You can learn so many things independently. And we have this inferiority complex, all of us, that I have to be a part of an institute to really learn. That's not true at all. I mean, I consider Hijab an expert when it comes to dealing with liberalism, but sometimes you can have a Muslim who studied liberalism academically at university, but because they haven't read around, they can't really deal with it, because in a way, you become quite binary, and you just learn a niche within a niche and you forget the bigger picture, which is why some of the great people in the field, they actually have crossed over from other fields. Like, for example, one of the key movers and shakers in evolutionary theory is James Shapiro, who actually studied as his undergrad English literature, nothing to do with biology. But right now, he is right at the cutting edge of an alternative to Darwinism known as natural genetic engineering. And he's recognized by academics and he's referenced by academics. But again, he's a polymath. He moved over. And I believe one of the reasons he's so good is because he mastered, English literature. Then he went into something totally different, as opposed to somebody that was just, going deeper and deeper in terms of niches, right?
It's like Chomsky, isn't it? Like he done really well with linguistics, and then he moved on to everything else, basically.
Yeah.
So do you think a mixture of videos and books would be good?
Yeah. Use everything you can, bro. Like, do you know there's some really like cutting edge lectures on YouTube? Like, for example, there's one about justice by Michael Sandel. I always recommend this on YouTube. It's like a 12-part series, man. Fantastic. It's the best you're gonna find.
Yeah.
It's a Harvard.
What was the name again? Sorry.
Michael Sandel. He wrote. He's a liberal, but obviously he wrote a book on communitarianism. But he goes through a lot of the political philosophies, a lot of the moral philosophies, and he's engaging with the audience. And it's probably one of the most popular lecture series online. It's absolutely like the best. You won't find anything better than that.
But stay tuned to the Sapience, and I've put a link here, and you can actually follow our work through the education portal. We're coming to the end of the live stream, so I won't be able to take any more people into the studio. So let's move. Jazakallah khair, brother Yusuf.
Okay, can I ask one more minor question? A small question.
If we could wrap up, because we are very much limited in time.
This is mine, man.
Okay.
Come on, let's.
Because there's other people waiting who I haven't put in the studio, so I feel like you can see all the names there.
Hopefully,
for the people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, very much, brother. Brother M. Casper.
Oh, that was me. I just spoke.
Oh, you just spoke. Okay.
Welcome, brothers.
Walaikum salam.
That's my clone. Brother Subboor, got a question for you, brother. I've been following your work now for a little bit, and admire what you do on evolution, etc. Question for you: what are your thoughts on earlier Islamic scholars like Al-Jahiz and Ibn Khaldun that wrote about evolution that predate Darwin? So I know Al-Jahiz has a book called Kitab al-Hayawan, and he posits theories that discuss evolution. What are your thoughts about these?
That's a very, very good question. So this is something in which I made a huge mistake. So I believe the standard narrative, which has even been pushed out by very prominent Western academics as well, that the Muslims were way ahead of everyone else when it comes to evolution. So referencing like Al-Jahiz and Ibn Khaldun and others. In fact, there's a book I was reading by a Cambridge, would you believe it, a Cambridge professor called Darwin's Ghost, in which she was repeating the same narrative, that Al-Jahiz and others, they had evolutionary ideas before Darwin, hence Darwin's Ghosts. However, there was a recent paper that was published, and this, by the way, is used by some Muslim evolutionists to say, look, what's the deal? They believed in it in the past. We believe in it. In fact, we even came up with it before Darwin. Now, Professor Shoaib Ahmad Malik, somebody you'll see on my channel, Darwinian Delusions as well, he actually refuted this argument in a way that it just completely surprised academics. I mean, not only like the Cambridge academic I'm speaking of, but also some Muslims who wanted to purely push the Darwinian narrative alongside the human chimpanzee history and everything. So he actually showed how the Muslims didn't actually have anything resembling modern Darwin theory, and in fact it's been shoehorned into their writing. So he looks into the works of Al-Jahiz. There's actually an Arab professor who has written that book, Islam's Quantum Question. What's his name? It's
Google it.
Yeah, please look him up. So he was pushing this narrative as well, very famous on YouTube as well. The Muslims discovered it. Muslims know. Yeah.
How do you say it, son?
Nidal Ghosami.
Yeah.
Nidal Ghosam. So all of these guys were pushing this narrative, and then that paper decisively showed there isn't an argument there. So I highly recommend that paper.
You mention the name and the author again?
The author is Professor Shoaib Ahmad Malik.
Okay.
And the paper, Shoaib Ahmad Malik.
Okay.
And the paper refutes the arguments that Muslims came up with Darwinism, and hence refutes the Muslim evolutionists today who simply want to accept.
So He's saying that it's an anachronism. They read into these
Yeah.
earlier scholars with the lens of Darwin.
Yep, exactly. So Mohammed Habib, Jazakallah khair, it's actually called Old Texts, New Mosques.
Okay. Yeah, listen, I did not I did not know about that.
Sorry?
I said I did not know about that. I always was kind of under that impression that they posited a priest that resembled what Darwin.
In fact, I repeated it, and I believed it to be true. I mean, I was surprised that once I found out what Shoaib had published and it'd been peer reviewed and it's come out in a journal, I was surprised that Cambridge University professors, nonetheless, I mean, no less, get this wrong. Right. So I mean, it's when Shoaib actually showed me what was going on, it was literally a case of cherry picking, right, which someone had done in the past and published, and nobody in academia bothered to actually go and check the translations and see if they were done properly, which again, a lot of academia is just based on testimony. So some Arab guy's done it, we trust him, everyone copies, and Shoaib actually went and looked at the source manuscripts and saw it's not the case at all.
I'll read it, Jazakallah.
Collaborative manuscripts with the pictures on them and so on. Is that what they're talking about? Have you seen those manuscripts?
Where?
Jarhead's ones. I haven't looked into what you've just said there. His book of animals.
Yeah. No, that's all valid. Yeah. But the idea that he came up with, right. That's okay. But he has great contributions to biology.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Jazakallah khair. On to Yusuf 2.0.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
I just had a quick question. Alhamdulillah, for my university course, I have to deal with cadavers. So the dead body. So just looking at it, it's maybe anatomy. And I just had a question about I'm not sure what the actual view is, but for the Anbiya, the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what actually happens in the grave? Are they alive? Are they preserved? I've heard a lot of things. So what is the actual what is solid?
Yeah, we don't believe that they decompose. We believe that they stay in their original form. They're incorruptible. I think that's the term they use.
Yeah, but the belief is that we don't believe they are alive. We believe all human beings pass away, but the bodies of prophets are not
decomposed.
In fact, I mean, maybe Hijab's going to refute me on this, but from my understanding, this is also true of the companions. That the companions that we have narrations about one of the, for example, companions who passed away on his journey to Cyprus, and that companion's body did not, and he died on the ship, and his body did not decompose. And we likewise have other stories of other companions who, I mean, again, these are not what the Prophet said. This is not what Allah said. These are things which came later, which people said this is also true for some of the Sahaba. Allah knows best.
By the way, do you know, nowadays, Catholic Church is a big scandal. Because they're trying to say that all their saints are not decomposed.
Right.
But most of these so-called non-decomposed bodies are all they put these, I don't know, wax or whatever.
Embalming, yeah.
Yeah, it's how it's called. Like what they done with Vladimir Lenin and in Russia. I don't think he was the same, but basically, yeah, this embalming thing.
I actually thought Ali Dawah was running us. It's Ali Dawah's fan.
Ali Dawah's fan, yeah.
So just
kick him out there, man. Chuck him out. But yeah. So we don't believe that. But in terms of the prophets,
and that's one of the miracles of the prophet.
Yeah, they lived Haya Barzakhiyya in the Hayat al Barzakh, in the Barzakh. Obviously, we don't believe they die in totality. We believe that there is a human death, but then they continue living in another sense, which is the Barzakh, which is what happens with everyone. Obviously, the Shuhada as well continue living another life as well.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, brother Yusuf. May Allah.
Can I just ask one quick question? I think I kind of know the answer to this. I was just thinking about a scenario. I think it's just a rewording essentially of a circular argument, but when we measure it, okay, let's say I have a laptop here and it measures 20 centimeters. There's an infinite amount of degree of let's say I have two Windows laptops that are exactly the same, right? But if I measure one length the same side on both, there's going to be a degree of difference essentially, right? Because do you get, like, I'm not sure how to describe it, but like, let's say one is 10.1 centimeters and the other one's 10.1. But if I take that to 10 more decimal places, or something, it's going to be different. Whenever at some point it's going to be different along those lines, right?
Sorry, I don't understand the context.
Okay, let me try and rephrase it. So like, let's say I have two objects that are meant to be exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I take the same length on both objects. At some point along the decimal place scale, they will differ, right?
Why?
Because they can't be exactly. It's not possible for like. This is where the question comes in. Really, is it like, mathematically speaking? Isn't it almost like impossible for something to be exactly the same in terms of measurement? Because at some point, like, let's say I go to the millionth decimal place, won't it vary?
No, why? Why would it?
I mean, in terms of like, because no particle, well, the arrangement of particles can't be exactly the same, because a particle can't like take the same like position in. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, but you said it's the same in the beginning.
No, I mean, in terms of like human manufacturing, the question hasn't really come in.
Right. Okay, you're not saying hypothetically. You're saying, yeah, okay, I get it.
In real terms, yeah, in real terms.
Yeah. So we make two different dolls. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, is it like, if you were to say like, using that logic, then would you say if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to make something, two exactly the same objects, and we take the same measurement on both, are they not going to be the same?
No, the thing is, Allah is the best of creators. I mean, that's just human imperfection, why things would be different, but with Allah it'd be the exact same.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think it's just almost like, yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
you're talking maybe about the measurement problem.
Yes.
Our ability to, or lack thereof, to measure something is different from the fact that the ontological reality of it being actually the same or not. So if we measure something, maybe our measurements or instruments are going to be problematic, but the fact that they're both the same can be, it's logically conceivable that you can have something the same height and the same size. Allah can create it like.
Yeah. So Jazakallah khair, Brother Yusuf, for your question. What we're going to be doing now is bringing this live stream to an end. It was really enjoyable. It went on a lot longer than I actually anticipated, but alhamdulillah, we got to speak to the audience. What did you think it was like?
Good. Yeah, very good. I mean, a very educated audience that they had very pertinent questions. Stay with us, and you know, happy to oblige and obviously be with the brothers and sisters that were on this. And we didn't get any females actually asking questions today, which is a shame. But you can obviously ask questions if you're. You can write them down if you want and so on. But alhamdulillah, it was good. I think it was productive.
Jazakallah khair, everybody. We are going to, inshallah, do a live stream every week, Saturday, and we will hopefully try and not do it this late, try and do it a bit earlier. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.